Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the Administration and Finance, Recreation and Parks Committee meeting for June 13th, 2023. We acknowledge our elected officials. Of course, we're present Mayor Kirk Wilson, Council Member Christine Hall, Council Member Michael Palermo, Council Member Peter Vanstrom, Council Member Sarah Beeson, Council Member G. Lee Hills, Council Member William Morthland. The purpose of committee meetings are for the city departments to convey information to the mayor and city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda, as well as provide updates of vital information essential for the operation of city government. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance does mandate the city administrator as the chair of committee meetings, and this is a public meeting, but not a public hearing, and therefore, while members of the public are certainly welcome to attend, we do not take public comments or questions during committee meetings unless specifically authorized by the mayor and council. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meetings on the second and fourth Monday of each month and fifth Monday in open forum. We do encourage citizens to engage our online platforms, and if you have any questions or need information, please contact the staff of the city. We're available to answer those questions and provide information to you. We also encourage everyone to visit the city website for meetings, information, and activities. We also encourage you to use this web service portal, the Roswell app, to report any issues or concerns. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the May 9th, 2023 Administration and Finance and Recreation and Parks Committee meeting.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Motion by Councilmember Hills, second by Councilmember Beeson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right. Okay. Thank you, Ray. All right. Okay, we have approval and then one abstention there. Thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda under administration, item number 2, consideration of a loud and unruly party ordinance. Mr. Davidson. Councilmember Hall would like to move.
Thank you. And I'll defer to Mr. Davidson for more detail, but I did ask to bring this forward. This basically does not change our ordinances and guides as far as decibels and loudness of music and what constitutes unruly behavior. But what this does is currently the only people that can be cited are the person that is perpetrating that. So generally if it's a tenant or somebody that's using a property. And this just gives our folks the opportunity, our code compliance, the opportunity to cite the owner on repeated offenses. So if somebody has a rental home, for example, and they have maybe like an Airbnb and different tenants, and if it's a constant or habitual problem, the owner can be cited as well. And it's similar to our spot ordinance where we can also cite the owner. And if you can add to that, Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. Yeah, this is actually, y'all have probably seen party houses. There's been some police reports regarding the party houses in neighborhoods and stuff like that. And right now, we can cite the people that are actually having the parties, but we can't ever stop the property owner from continually renting it out for parties. So this would give us the ability to actually cite the owner of the property also.
All right, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
And so even though it's being called a loud and unruly party ordinance, sounds to me like just really an accountability ordinance that it's just making not only the person having a loud and unruly party accountable, but also the owner of that property accountable as well, and just really increasing their accountability. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Beeson.
I had a clarifying question. Looking at the language, it's defined as minor as any person under the age of 21 years old. That would directly conflict with Georgia law, which recognizes minors as 18 years old, or depending on the law, 17 years old. Is there a reason why we define minor as 21?
If you look at the actual allowed and unruly conduct, it talks about selling to minors, selling alcohol to minors, possession of and/or consumption of alcohol by minors. So it's illegal for anyone under 21. And these definitions are strictly for this code section, so it's not in conflict with anything other. I mean, it's just for this code section.
Yes, Councilmember Beeson.
Another follow-up question. Would this be enforced by Roswell Police Department or by code enforcement? Because I see the enforcement officer language, 8.11.1, enforcement officer says RPD. But a lot of these, especially because if they're not the active participant in the breaking of the law, would that not be code enforcement?
It would be enforceable by both. That's why it's listed as enforcement officer. Police have the ability to enforce these ordinances, and so do our code enforcement officers.
So in that situation, who would it defer to? If the ability, or if it's applicable to both types of enforcement officers, who would be enforcing these instances normally?
Depends on what it is. So if it's a minor in possession of alcohol, it's probably going to be the police. Noise ordinance, probably going to be the police. I think they have all the sound meters. But if it's other litter or something like that, it'd be code enforcement.
And that's with enforcing with the property owner, not with those who are directly, well, obviously they would be enforcing with those directly involved, but the same people would apply to the enforcement with the property owner?
Correct.
Yes, Councilmember Morthley.
Looking under the penalty section, it references 1.1.3 of the code. Can you touch on that real quick? Is the first time a free pass, the second time is a penalty, the third is a...
No, that's our general penalty, so it's up to $2,000 fine or up to 6 months in jail. And that's just our general, if you violate our ordinance, that's what our charter gives us the ability for the judge to sentence you to. Now, most of the times it's, if it's your first time, it's going to be lower, and then it's going to, if you're a repeat offender, you're probably going to get cited.
Councilmember Beeson?
Follow-up question to Councilmember Northland's question. In that case, then, would it be applicable for any time there's a call out for RPD or a code enforcement agent to go to these households, the property owner will be immediately notified and somehow implicated? Or is there a certain threshold of like 3 strikes, you're out, and we start to enforce?
So our code enforcement and our police officers are usually very lenient when they go out and it's just a loud party. They'll say turn it down. So you're not getting a citation immediately. If it continues, though, they will give a citation, and that's when the notice would be provided. It's kind of subjective up to the officer.
Got it. And are there specific examples of where this would have been applicable in the past in Roswell?
There's been occasions where we've had party houses. I know there was a party house in Wexford where several people were cited, underage possession of alcohol and such. There's been other instances that I can think of. I don't know if anybody was ever cited, to be honest with you, though.
Councilmember Palermo.
I was actually going to say, in my former neighborhood, there was a house at the front. It wasn't known as the party house, but all the neighbors unaffectionately called it a different word that started with P. And the irony is, actually, wasn't thinking about it until hearing more of this discussion, that this type of ordinance is something that would have really made a lot of the neighbors really happy there, because it was out of state, an out-of-state landlord, and some people that were definitely, I'll just say it was a party house, but a lot of the neighbors were frustrated that it was a lot worse than just a party house. So, and I know there's other examples besides that one that I've certainly heard about through complaints to mayor and council and code enforcement and things like that.
All right, thank you. Any further questions, comment? All right, seeing none, we'll entertain a motion of moving this item forward.
I'd like to motion to move this forward.
Motion by Councilmember Hall,
Second.
second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. We'll move this item forward. The next item on the agenda, item number 3, consideration of the Canton Street Promenade Task Force framework. On May 23rd, at the committee meeting of Community Development and Transportation, this body gave direction to staff to bring forward a draft framework that would provide the apparatus to move forward with developing a Canton Street Promenade Task Force. And you have a draft there in your notebook, which attempts to balance composition of potential members, provide latitude for proper review of pertinent issues, substantial support from the staff of the city, and then, of course, identifying ultimate authority of the mayor and council. I'll briefly summarize a few things, and of course, certainly we want to entertain questions and comments and or recommendations, modifications as needed from this body. But essentially, the task force, as written here and drafted, would provide 8 total staff force members, 4 of which would be business owners or operators of businesses on Canton Street or within 1,000 feet of Canton Street. And for purposes of this discussion, that would be from Magnolia to Woodstock, again, for purposes of this discussion for potential selection, and that's of course left to this body to determine. 2 residents living within 1/2 mile of Canton Street, and then 1 resident, excuse me, selected at large from within the city, and then a task force chair identified by the mayor. Of course, all of this would be subject to mayor and council approval for all of these selections. It also spells out the responsibilities of the task force in some detail under item number 3. The task force considerations shall include but not be limited to the following: safe movement of pedestrian matriculation along Canton Street and immediately adjacent streets and access points, delivery logistics to restaurant and retail establishments, the boundaries of the promenade area, time and extent of promenade opening, public safety access, ADA parking access points, rideshare areas, parking areas, traffic circulation, and special events. The intent, again, is to provide guidance for the task force and also the ability for the task force to provide recommendation back to mayor and council. As drafted, that is within 30 days of the task force formation, and it also has a termination date of the task force of 90 days as written and drafted. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. So as Mr. Knighton knows, I certainly have I'm very excited about creating this task force. I also have some very major issues with this current draft. I think overall, it's great and definitely appreciate it. But I'd like to walk through my feedback, which Mr. Knighton's aware of, the rest of this committee is not aware of. So first off, when it mentions for business owners / operators, and that's where I really feel it should be. I definitely agree with representing the business type nature, but I feel it should be for and either business owners, operators, employees, or landowners. And so I think those are certainly business perspectives that we should consider, and obviously it'd be up to the council and whoever they decide to select. But I don't think it should be limited purely to business owners or operators. I do feel there should be the option for a landowner or employee or anything like that to get a voice. Then I mentioned, I think you kind of just, I think you somewhat addressed, but I feel like it would have to be crystal clear, what is the half-mile radius of Canton Street? You know, like, exactly what is that, just to make sure that it's completely fair and known ahead of time. Here's what is in it, here's what is not in it. And then also, major, so there's a few minor ones, but I'll go to my major one. I am not supportive of the mayor getting two, with all due respect, nothing personal for Mayor Wilson. It's just for, at the end of the day, all elected officials have one vote, and I'd expect that all elected officials have one nomination as well. And I'm certainly, although to me, I think 7 makes sense instead of having 8. If staff's recommendation is 8, I think that's absolutely fine, but I'd expect to see the mayor and city council each have one nomination, and there be one kind of total nomination, and we can, obviously this committee can discuss what that looks like, but I'm not in support of any elected official having a quarter of the nominations of a board. My thing is, I kind of question, so I think it's great, because as discussed and so often in this city, and I even frankly heard and seen some frustration that really wanted to make sure it was a better process being used and a task force being used, and there was frustration that they were wondering, why hasn't this task force been formed yet, or anything, and so I definitely like the fact that we're not going to just kick a can or just meet for the sake of meeting, but it's really to be productive. And so I guess if the recommendation is due in 30 days after the formation, why would there be a 90-day term? Why wouldn't it be something like a 60-day term? So that's a question / comment I have. And then my one other one, and Mr. Knighton will keep me honest, because I certainly called him to share my viewpoint. I believe it was, so it mentions earlier that just basically they cannot direct staff, which makes sense, and we don't want there to be any confusion on that. But then it mentions if city staff's requested to attend, they should notify at least 3 business days in advance to ensure the staff are able to and prepared and all that. So that's where it just seems like it contradicts it a little bit. And I think it is important that we're setting this up for success. And then lastly, I think we would want to make it clear in here that frankly there's not a budget attached to it. So, because I mean, I think in reality, we've heard from so many different great residents that have so many different great ideas, and with just a couple $1 million, I feel like there's so many residents that have so great ideas all over the city on what we could do when spending the money. But ultimately, I think it is important that we're making it clear. We're looking for their guidance, input, listening to businesses, listening to residents, all of that. And it's not just to assume that there's some money that we don't necessarily have. So those are all my comments regarding this task force recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Valero. Councilmember Vanstrom.
Thank you, Councilman. I would love to see a halfway point on that. I like the 90-day term, because it gives a lot of time for everybody to come back and forth, come back to the council for conversation, come back to their elected officials, whether it's in the format like this or whether it's individually. But I think 45 days would make a nice halfway mark instead of the 30 days. I would like to see that as a change. We have one resident at large. I was interested in why we have a resident at large. We don't have business people at large. And if we're going to take the number down to 7, which always
I'm
makes...
fine with 8.
always makes, we're going to take the number down to 7 as suggested. It hasn't been voted on, but if we take it down to 7, that's always nice to have an odd number anyway when you're voting on things. You don't end up in those terrible ties that cause so much trouble. So I mean, I would just love to see the one resident at large. Maybe that's the one that is taken off. And then why do we have in this document that we're dictating that a resident is the task force leader? Wouldn't the group themselves be choosing their task force leader?
That's what I thought.
So that's just another question I have. I think that's it for now. I'll probably come up with a couple more.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Beeson.
Didn't forget to say thanks for all your hard work, sir.
Yes, no problem. Thank you very much. One point of clarification very quickly. The way the draft is written, and I think it was illuminated, perhaps what I just wanted to highlight it, the task force chair if this form remains, the task force chair would only vote in the case of a tie and would facilitate meetings and coordination with staff, et cetera. Just for point of clarification.
For clarification, how would there be a tie if there's 8 people and 7 people,
Someone
7
could
voting
be
members?
Absent, someone could be absent.
The goal is not to be absent. My point of clarification goes back to some of the similar points that they had made. I agree that there should be 7 members in the same way that we have. There's 6 of us and 1 of us votes in the event of a tie. I think that the chair should only vote in the event of a tie. I also second Councilmember Palermo's opinion that it really should just be each of us gets 1 appointee to it. I do have some hesitations about having a resident at large because it would be hard to me in order to make the case that they would be directly impacted depending on where they are in town. However, I understand probably the need to have someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight. So I can kind of understand that one. And I also would like to second Councilmember Vanstrom's opinion that I would rather the task force itself or the committee select their own chair in the same way that our committees otherwise would be selecting their own chair. And then there's a line item for objectives. It says the specific objectives in addition to the broader goals and objectives identified in the strategic plan are ensure safe passage of residents and visitors on Canton Street, to promote the economic enhancement of Canton Street businesses in the entire city, and to evaluate the establishment of Canton Street as a high-value destination within the city of Roswell and the region. Some resident feedback that I had gotten on that is that's really not really what the task force goal should be. That's our goal as mayor and council or even as staff in the city. Rather, the goal of this task force should be more delineated to the feasibility of potential Canton Street closure. That's it. I don't think the task force needs to be weighing in on the economic viability or the high-value destination of Canton Street. I think based off of how it's comprised, it might naturally lean that way because people do have some skin in the game here with owning businesses or a home along Canton Street. But really, the ultimate goal is Canton Street closure as a promenade an option? And if so, how? And then lastly, I want to reiterate, I think several people had the same amount of feedback of the 30 days of formation providing that report back, or the comprehensive recommendation. Depending on when this is initiated, this is also during summer, people going out of town. To me, that's a scramble, especially if we're convening this task force for 90 days. What's the rush for having them provide recommendations in 30 days if they're going to be a task force for 90 days? Why not move that out? That's it for me for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Vanstrom.
Thank you. I did leave out one thing. I love Councilman Palermo's suggestions of adding the landowners. I think as a business owner myself, though, I don't think I would want my employees speaking for me. So that's just my take on it as a business, small business owner. Because I think if you have the business owners, the landowners, that's terrific, and the operators, you get the most highly impacted. So just put that out there. All right.
Thank you. Any further comments at this time? Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. I think great discussion. Obviously, even for my own things I mentioned, some of them were obviously really important to me and big. Some of them were not as much. Even for the employee one, not that important. It's just I think a consideration should be. Even just the employees have to park, they have to leave late, things like that. That's kind of my thought process. But again, if this committee prefers, that's not a hill I'm dying on. Same thing whether it was 7 or 8. But now that I'm hearing the arguments for 7, I kind of agree and think I'm now a little more married to 7 versus indifferent between the 7 and 8. At first, I was disagreeing with Councilmember Beeson that I felt those objectives that Mr. Knight had provided were great. But after hearing, I actually do prefer to kind of limit it, because back to my original thing, if my goal is here to evaluate the establishment of a Canton Street as a high-value destination within the city of Roswell and the region, great solution. Let's just say that the city needs to spend $10 million and create something we've never heard of, which actually might be really cool. Problem is we don't have that $10 million. So I think better decide, should it be opened up to pedestrian only? If so, how, when, size, all these different things, and yes, no, all that stuff. So I do like the limiting the focus. Ironically, I actually think with 7, I think they all should just have to vote, even the chairman. Again, that's when I'm not dying on that hill, but my preference would be, hey, we're putting 7 members on there. Let's give them all the chance to vote. And I think that kind of covers everything. I will say, so even though my intent would not be to have, for someone that I would like to appoint, and I have no idea who it would be, but I think I'd be looking to somebody that had a business interest or a home that was walkable right there. So I would not be affected by this, but I actually will say that a resident at large does have a dog in the fight. That Roswell is their city. The downtown historic district is their downtown historic district. They do have tax dollars that are being allocated to Canton Street and not necessarily to their street or their neighborhood. And so I would argue that wherever they live in Roswell, they are relevant, their voice should matter. But that being said, I'm not dying on that hill, since I think it does also make sense choosing a resident that lives within a half a mile of Canton Street, or someone that owns a business or owns land or operates a business or things like that. So those are all my reactions to the discussion I heard.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. Forgive me for not knowing this. Is a task force different from board or commission? And are there sunshine laws that prevail over this, or can the whole group meet and talk, and how does that work?
I think we wanted to ensure that the task force meetings were open as appointed by this body. Also, with the task force, generally it is for a specific issue, and therefore was a reason why the draft contains a recommendation date of 30 days and then 90-day termination. For boards and commissions, they generally have a much larger and broader task or responsibility, if you will, which is in task force generally operate for a prescribed period of time for a specific objective. Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to ask a question and ask my colleagues to perhaps deliberate on this first. Before we maybe get sucked into the details, is determine what you want the task force to be. In other words, you say, what do you mean by that? Because we've mentioned voting, we've mentioned a number of people, but really, what is it? Do you want the task force? And in my mind, the task force is a deliberative body for a short-term period that is coming up with solutions, has a very specific deadline, a very specific type of activity. And so what you're really looking for is collaborative actions and collaborative activity to figure out a problem or a set of problems. And I just suggest that to you. So before we go down the road maybe of addressing members and voting and this stuff, maybe we determine if we want a task force, because we may not want a task force, right? You may want a committee or something else. What is it we really want? What are we asking? What do we want and what are we asking them to do? And that might help set up some of the framework for some of the other questions of, like, how many members, are they voting? Is there a chairman? Does the chairman vote? All those kind of things that are very important and applicable pieces of any kind of organization you're putting together. But maybe the first discussion we have is the task force a short-term deliberative body set up with a very specific goal to solve a certain set of problems? And if that is what it is, how do we want them to do that? If that's not, is the task force set up to be a deliberative body that is going to debate the merits of whether or not to do this or not? That's a whole different discussion. So I might ask that my colleagues maybe kind of deal with that issue first.
Councilmember Hall.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. My understanding is that task force was, the initiative is to address how this is going to happen, the logistics of this all. So given that, I think that's where we need to start. It's what's the best time? Do we go August 1st? Do we go August, September, October? Do the fall, close it full-time for those time periods? Those are the types of things that I see the task force basically recommending. And, or perhaps, permanently from then on, or Or do we start it in April of next year?
Thank you, Councilmember Morthland.
Yeah, I agree with that. The whole purpose of this is for them to give us boots on the ground feedback around things that they're familiar with that we may not be get that purview to, because we're not there on the restaurant side of things. We don't have the doors open. We don't know the customer flow. We don't understand technically, as well as the business owners and the folks that live on Canton Street, the traffic flows of when high points and low points and all that. That's the point in this task force, is for them to give us groundwork on how this can be successful in their minds, and we can have a collaborative effort to come together and this be the best product as possible. The only other thing that I was seeing in here is when we advertise the meetings, is that going to be the same thing as when we as the city advertise our meetings and, hey, this is going to take place in 2 days' time, 3 days' time? I was reading this and it doesn't necessarily say meetings are to be provided in 48 hours notice, so everybody can have understanding that there will be a task force meeting coming.
Right, yes. I would assume that we would follow the standard protocols that we use for public meetings for the city. One other item just for illustrative purposes, can you pull up the map there? I did want to make sure that this is, see Canton Street there in the middle, and that's the 1,000-foot buffer boundary, and I guess that's a darker orange color, and then the red color is 1/2 mile. Again, southern boundaries being Magnolia and northern boundary being Woodstock, just for illustrative purposes.
I just want to say thank you for being prepared and bringing that, because it's interesting. So even, for example, like Liberty, I would have assumed Liberty would have been in the smaller distance, and now I'm seeing that actually Liberty, as close as they are actually in the larger distance. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Beeson.
From my personal perspective, and I think this is a point that was made by Councilmember Palermo at a previous meeting, the first time that we had discussed this, was making sure that we all have clarity as to, based off of what the recommendations are made by this task force, is that task force makes recommendations, that's what's happening, or is it the same way that we have, say, the planning commission makes a recommendation to mayor and council, we weigh those decisions, and then we still vote maybe with them or maybe independently of them. Is there any clarity on that?
I would certainly, just again, from my perspective and the way the draft was written, the intent was for this task force to make recommendations to the mayor and council, and the mayor and council having ultimate authority to make decisions which are final, based on recommendations from the task force. Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Under task force responsibilities, roles and responsibilities, number 3,
Yes.
I guess what this comes down to is, are we talking about exploring the viability, or are we looking at letter D, time and extent of promenade opening? Yeah, are we presenting this to the task force as we will have a promenade? Or are we presenting this to the task force as help us explore the viability of a promenade on Canton Street?
And I'd actually like to say that there's actually, I feel like, an in-between of that. Because theoretically it could be explore the viability, period, of ever being one. Or it could be, it's, like you said, it's happening, et cetera. I really see an in-between of, if there's to be a trial of a promenade, what should that trial look like? How would a trial work that could minimize any negative impacts and maximize any benefits? And so I just want to point out that I think that's just, that there's not just 2 possibilities, but I think there could be multiple possibilities this council could choose.
Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Thank you, Councilman. I would add to that, in the trial, if we're going to have a trial period, how to simulate most closely that a true closure and the impact that would be had.
All right, thank you.
It's a great idea.
Any further comments at this time? Questions? Yes, Councilmember Beeson.
What are the next steps? So say, for instance, we finalize the task force or its formation or this tonight, what would be the timeline moving forward, or what would be the next steps from here?
Councilmember Palermo.
As I mentioned earlier, definitely hearing and seeing from some, and ironically, not both some individuals that were really curious and interested in a trial, as well as some individuals that were dead against a trial. I feel like I've heard from the different groups, both of which were saying, the city said they were gonna come out with this task force, and it's taken forever, where is it? And so from that standpoint, I think this council does need to come up with what are the exact guidelines and expectations of this task force, and that we look to make sure that's moving fast. So I think if we can come to agreement, we should look to even schedule a special call meeting next week, because there's multiple steps. It's not just a matter of voting this task force. Let's just pretend we love this draft, we vote this draft in. We still have to get to closure, talk about the different, the personnel, the individuals that we'd want to appoint to that task force. Then we have to have a public meeting to actually vote on them, and so that they can go ahead and get to work. So from that standpoint, I think it is important that we're moving with haste, given the fact that that a lot of residents on both sides of the issues and a lot of businesses on both sides of the issues want to make sure that that they're being heard and this task force is being created.
Sure, go ahead, please. Go ahead, please. Councilmember Beeson.
I hear you on the timeline and the expediency of it, because I don't think the point of this is to intentionally just draw this out as long as possible. But I feel like the dates that we already have in place for our current meetings make sense, and that if, say, we were to finalize the framework this evening, I would want at least 2 weeks for us as mayor and council to receive applications from people who would be interested, or opening it up to, that way that we can have a formal process, the same way we do with our other boards and committees, that people apply online, they send their resume. Additionally, if, say, for instance, because our next closure is 2 weeks from yesterday, so if we formalize the framework tonight, we accept suggestions, applications, whatever, over the next 2 weeks, we would then have closure to make our recommendations in closure, and then would finalize it at the committee meeting 2 weeks from today.
So
Go ahead, please. Councilmember Palermo
Okay.
first, or Councilmember Vanstrom.
Actually, I appreciate that, but I think if we did, I think finalizing all this tonight puts a little pressure on it coming out exactly the way we would like. And I think if we had a week and we had a special called session in a week, then we could begin the process of looking at the applications and looking at all of our choices that we're going to be making and exploring those. I'm just not really convinced that we're going to come up with the best item out of here by 8
Let me
o'clock
make a
tonight.
suggestion, if I may, just for consideration purposes. We, of course, do have an ongoing planning and strategy session on Friday with mayor and council.
I will not be in attendance for that.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. I didn't know that. I was going to suggest that perhaps could be, if the committee is unsettled about finalizing a framework tonight, that could provide another opportunity. Yes, Mayor.
I could possibly be on Zoom. However, I am very big on the people's calendar and don't like the idea of something so important being discussed during the morning of a workday. But interestingly enough, Councilmember Beeson's timeframe and timeline that she gave, I agree with, which requires a special call meeting next week, because we cannot finalize this tonight. This is a committee meeting. This absolutely has to be voted on at a council meeting. So that would be the purpose for the week, because the problem is if we don't have a special called meeting to do this, and also for the meeting currently scheduled, unless you change the type of meeting that it is Friday morning, it can't be finalized there either. This needs to be finalized in a public meeting with public comment, and we can't in closure be deciding who is going to be on the task force if we haven't finalized the rules on how we appoint someone. So that's why I think there's benefit to a special call meeting next week, knowing that it's still a long process, and next week everything's not being finalized.
Can I, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, Mayor Wilson.
Let me throw out some things that I think might help the discussion. If it doesn't help the discussion, please say it doesn't have discussion. It sounds like, let's make some things. It sounds like 7 members is the right number. Is that a check off? All right. Sounds like that all council people and the mayor all get one person with it. That changed at the special call meeting, if there's a special call meeting. So I want to get some highlights here. What I think might be important, it might be a quick discussion or a long discussion, is what is the mission of the task force? Like if the task, yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry, that's good. I'm not a record.
All right, seven members we're in agreement on, right? Everybody gets a choice. Before, I think maybe we talk about the voting piece, because I'm not so sure that this should be a voting body, right? It's a body that you want to say, hey, you residents and businesses, you're specially called to find out what are the solutions to the problem. And I think that's what we all want. Like, let's charge this special group, this task force, to go solve the problem. And is that 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever, 180 days? But we're going to ask a special group of people to go solve a problem. And if they come back and say, look, we can't solve the problem, then that, sometimes bodies have that problem. But I believe that reasonable people can get together and they'll have some disagreement and they'll say, look, they're going to come up and make recommendations, i.e. through the task force of, these are our suggestions for the Canton Street Promenade. And that's really what we're asking for, in a nutshell. And I think that's what I'm asking for consensus. Is that what really we're asking for? Because if it's not, we kind of need to change the terms of our discussion.
So I agree with your points. I do believe it's important they vote, because what I've experienced when there have been some task force together, you'll have two members that say the exact opposite thing, and it's a bunch of nodding, and at the end of the meeting, you don't know where they stand. So that's where, if there are going to be recommendations, they need to be voted on, because hypothetically, if one member is saying, you know what, every Saturday for a month might be a great trial, and if they don't vote on that, is that the recommendation, or did it turn out the others disagreed and they just never got into it?
Well, the body, though, will have to put out recommendations.
They have to vote on those recommendations, though.
Well, not everybody votes. Sometimes bodies come together and they do, you can vote. I'm not saying, you don't want it, I don't want to turn this into a political exercise.
I'd say it's not a political exercise,
And what I
but you
mean
can't
by-
risk having one member go rogue and just decide they're writing the recommendations.
Say that again, Michael, sorry.
I'd say you can't have one member go rogue and make their recommendations that perhaps the majority of the body doesn't agree with. So that's where a vote would make it crystal clear to staff what the majority of the board's official recommendations.
Well, somebody could always say, look, I was on the task force and I completely vehemently disagree with what the task force did. Right? There's nothing to prevent that from happening. And that's why I think it's very important. So for us to figure out the framework second, but the mission first. If we agree with what the mission is, then we'll work out the framework, as imperfect or perfect as that might be. But I think the first thing we got to say is, do we want to give the mission of the task force to be, please solve for us the problem of opening up the Canton Street Promenade? Is that the mission? Because if that's not the question, then what do you want the question to be? Is there a different question?
Councilmember Hall.
And that was the impetus for forming the task force, because we had the meetings, we had the whiteboard, we had all of, the concerns of this is, how are we going to address this concern and this concern, the ADA parking and those concerns. That's what the task force is supposed to do, is to get the answers to that. That's my understanding of what the task force is supposed to do.
All right. Any further questions or comments and direction? Yes, Councilmember Beeson.
Just as potential recommended language for the potential mission, since my understanding is that's what you're trying to land the plane on tonight, is the feasibility of a trial closure for a potential Canton Street Promenade? Is that what we're trying to determine?
I don't think it's feasibility. This is the plan is the Canton Street Promenade. Here are some concerns. Address those.
When you say promenade, are you saying it as a permanent installation, or are you referring to it as a what we originally were discussing, which was a trial closure. Are you talking about the permanent feasibility of it or temporary?
That's a great question.
Yeah, and I would think that, I think the permanent would come after the trial, depending on the trial.
I think for purposes of, this is my thinking of the task force, I think the purposes are, the question at hand is, problem, Canton Street Promenade on a trial basis. Can you solve for that problem?
On trial basis.
On a trial basis. The only thing I think to, per your question is, we're not asking permanent, we're saying, the problem exists today, that's how we left the discussion was, can the Canton Street Promenade be solved on a trial basis?
And what does that trial basis look like?
Yeah.
What are the aspects, what are the details, what are the timing, what is the location? But I'd say for me, I strongly believe this is what are the logistics for a potential trial?
Keep the question simple and let the challenges and the answers go wherever the task force determines they need to go with those. Does that sound reasonable?
All right. Thank you. All right. Yes, Councilmember Morthland.
Yes, it all sounds very much in line. And I do agree with Councilman Palermo about the voting piece. I'm familiar with several instances in my hometown of where you had a very powerful figurehead that sat on top of a board that really got his way because there was no voting piece to it. And so by instigating or by pulling the vote piece forward, every vote and every voice counts at that point, instead of having one person have their agenda and everybody else is scared to address that agenda. That's what you get away from with them.
Will, I wish you hadn't told on yourself. Because the city of Roswell residents do not realize the amount of clout you have behind the scenes and the level of intimidation and fear that we all have. So,
Walk quietly, carry a big stick.
yes. It's a fair point. I will tell you, I have been on executive committees where we didn't vote. Where we really had to figure it out. Voting is the natural order of things. I have just been on executive committees where as serious people in the room, we had to figure out the problem. And we had to come to consensus on the solutions. And that took us, sometimes it wasn't easy. But I recognize that voting is the natural order of things. And I'm not trying to dispute that or say no to it.
All right, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Maybe they find they don't have to vote, maybe they find they have to vote. I think that's about what you just summed up. I think that's a fair comment. I mean, exactly right. I've been on plenty of committees that we've solved problems and we haven't voted, and I've been on committees where we've had to vote because we've got some rogues that are a pain in the rear. So
Exactly.
You have to bring them in, bring them around. So how about feasibility of a trial closure for a potential pedestrian promenade?
I think it's perfect, in my mind.
I guess I have concerns with the word feasibility.
Yeah.
Feasibility sounds to me just like the narrowed focus is a yes or no. Yes, it's feasible. No, it's not feasible. When I'd say really the goal is all the details around. So instead of feasibility, it's all the details around, or because basically it's how do we maximize benefit and minimize downsides of a trial run.
Mayor Wilson.
Downsides or negative impacts.
So if, to kind of put it in language that if you put it to me, I would understand. Problem, Canton Street Promenade does not exist today. Is there a solution? Is there a solution to that? Canton Street Promenade does not exist. Is there a solution on a trial basis?
Councilmember.
Yes. How?
How?
How do you solve for the problem?
Yeah, how do you solve?
How do you solve for the problem on a trial basis?
How do you maximize benefit and mitigate the negative impacts of a trial closure? I like the way you said that. so I'm
Okay.
trying to-
For a pedestrian promenade.
For a pedestrian promenade? Sounds good to me.
All right.
Right?
All right, so I think we have some direction there. Let me get Councilmember Morthland, please.
So real quick, are we addressing the other items you brought up earlier, or are we putting that to a side? landlord edition, half mile, well, we got the half mile circle. Are we down to 7 people now?
I-
Are we addressing all
I
those?
think 7 is a consensus. I think everybody shook their head and said, yeah, let's do 7, right? Everybody said 7.
Are we doing a 45-day term? Are we doing a 60-day term? I heard that floated out
I
there.
think that's going to get melted out a little bit between now and council meeting
Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
Friday.
No, special call meeting. I'm proposing, I think there should be a full week, both for this council to review it and a full week for the public to see the draft coming out of here. And so I'd actually propose that we'd have a special called meeting, so today's Tuesday, so next Tuesday at 7 PM to just address, to have just this be the one item on the special call meeting.
Councilmember Beeson.
So to clarify, you would rather do a special call next week in order to finalize just this, the framework? When would you recommend, that if that's the case, then I would maybe want, it's a little tight with the following week for us to be able to take recommendations for people who are interested or people who want to apply, because we haven't really settled on what exactly we want the framework to be. That's going to be less than a week's timeline for people to be like, hey, I read it, I'm interested, sign me up, let's do it. And for us to review those and really take into consideration who each of our appointments are going to be, and also to make sure we don't have overlapping appointments, because who knows, you could go into it being like, man, I love John Smith, and you're like, well, that was my pick. So I think there was going to need a little more time than less than a week for us to sort that out before closure.
We could always do, so if we have a special called meeting a week from tonight, 7 PM, the following week we have committee. Right after the committee meeting, we could have a special called meeting purely to go into closure. That would give a full week to review. And I think Councilmember Beeson brings up a great point we should all be aware of, is we should absolutely be prepared to go into closure for a good discussion to make sure there's the right balance on there. Because with that example, if Councilman Vanstrom has someone he thinks is the absolute best, who's a resident, lives within 1.5 mile, I actually have someone that's the best, a resident that lives within 1/2 mile, and it's the next door neighbor of that individual, is that maybe they do have great, perspectives, or maybe it makes sense to look at a different balance. But that would give a full week of the public as well as this council to review the draft, and then we give a full week for thought to go into a closure meeting to finalize the group.
All right, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Appreciate Councilman Moreland started to try to recap it. Can I just add just a couple of things real quick that maybe you could just have organized? I think we're looking at all landowners, business owners, and operators, employee.
Yeah, I think it's struck.
Yeah,
I prefer it, but I'm not dying on that hill. I just
Well,
want to make sure we're
I'm of the
inclusive.
frame of mind a business owner should be representing their employees in those situations.
One would hope, yes.
all right. So that was just one, I think
So,
that's.
Peter, to your point, it sounds like a quick consensus there. Did you adding one piece of that language? So business owners, operators.
Or landlords.
Or landowners. So an addition, and one strike. Is that fair?
Yes.
In terms of language?
And then 7, are we gonna decide, I think we could quickly decide, is that 4 business owners, 3 residents? If it's a big decision, we can put it off, I'm just trying to get some of this done.
Yep, 4 business owners within 1/2 mile.
Again, it's not business owners. It'd be for either
Yeah, of the-
landlords.
of that category.
Yeah,
4
four of that
commercial,
category.
3 residential.
Is that okay? Or do you guys want to hammer that out?
Kind of feel like it should be, I don't like the uneven aspect. I kind of feel like one of the 7 should be someone that represents a business and is a resident.
Those exist.
They do exist.
They exist. Okay. Then we'll hammer
So in other
that
words, we'll
one
hammer that
more.
out later.
We'll hammer
Okay.
that out.
That's good.
How about this?
I think
4,
that's
2,
it.
4, 2, and 1, and the 1 is a,
TBD.
yes.
Well, that actually makes it even more imbalanced. My point was,
You want one commercial that is a residential.
yes.
Interesting.
And then that way you have, and then 3 and 3.
Well, I guess there's only so many people that we can pick from that talent pool that assumes that they're interested and available.
There will be. I don't mind that. Okay. I don't mind that at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so that at least put us a little further along the road. Good.
Yes.
Good, okay?
Yes.
Is that beneficial, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, absolutely.
And we do have Mr. Knighton and the rest of the staff who can certainly listen to this meeting and find all the consensus. And if anything, if this committee is okay with it, I'd actually like for us to vote and direct Mr. Knighton to update the draft based on where he heard the consensus. So for example, there's no need for what's advertised for the special call meeting next week to show 8 members when we know that it's only gonna be 7 members.
Just for clarity,
Yeah.
I think what Peter and Will were doing is like, this language is getting corrected now to be voted on, and it may change again at the council meeting. Right, I think that's what, right?
Absolutely.
But some changes are being made right now, like seven members, for example, that's a change. Adding landowners, that's a change. What was the committee consensus,
The breakdown.
the breakdown, yeah.
And the timeline is, I think there's.
And the, yeah, we have, the timeline we haven't touched, and the mission. I think you wrote down, whatever the mission was, the mission.
I wanna make sure you're not changing it last minute
Ah.
after we got consensus on it.
All right, I think we made some progress. Of course, thank you very much for the input, and as I understand it, we'll be conducting a special called meeting in a week. So is there a specific motion that would like to be, yes?
Can I ask a question? Because I'm not sure, I want to make sure. Does the body want to have a meeting next Tuesday night? Is a consensus on that? Okay. Just FYI, I will be rushing, I'll be coming from Gunnersville, Alabama.
Is that 5 o'clock or?
Does it have to be
8
7?
o'clock.
I know you guys are married to 7 for everything.
I can't
Does
do
it have to
7
be
next
7?
week. Yeah.
I think 8 o'clock sounds better from his.
I mean, from my perspective, I'll be rushing to get
Yeah, I
here.
was thinking 5. If it's 5 for a
So
standing
on the
committee
front
time.
side, no?
Not for me, because I'll be leaving
Should we,
Alabama at 5 o'clock.
what about Wednesday night then?
Wednesday.
So Wednesday,
Wednesday's good.
Wednesday the 21st?
5, I guess.
That's
No.
Wednesday, 21st is good.
Okay,
At 7, you said?
I think 7, so people have the chance to be coming home from work.
Okay.
Is that at the table?
Wednesday,
At
the
the table or the
21st?
dice?
Oh, yeah, the dice, yeah.
No, I mean us or.
Us.
Or viewers.
Oh, yes, viewers.
The
So I'm
audience.
betting for 5.
Yeah, I like 5.
I'd
On
say-
Wednesday, the 21st?
Committee's at 5.
It's a special call meeting.
I couldn't
But
agree more.
Committee's at 5.
I disagree. I think 5, you get a lot of people that work till 5:30. I think maybe we do 6 or 6:30, but I think going earlier is not responding to people's calendar.
See, conversely, the people's calendar, I think, is unique in this because a lot of those business owners and operators are in the middle of dinner rush at 7 o'clock. Whereas 5 o'clock, it's pretty calm if they're going to be watching the stream.
Well, kind of to your point, they're kind of screwed time-wise
Right,
anyway.
right. Either way,
5,
not the
6,
best.
7, they're all, they're.
Yeah. I'd say 6 or later.
I have to agree with 5, Michael, I'm sorry.
Will?
Well, don't be sorry to me, it's
I
the
gotta
it's the
sorry you,
residents,
I gotta
yes.
sorry you.
Don't be
I'm
sorry
not
to me, it's the
sorry,
the
the
residents, yeah. Yeah. I'm
What's your
here, I
thought?
can make 5, yeah.
No, they're looking at Wednesday, the 21st.
Wednesday, 21st.
Wednesday, the 21st.
How about 5:30, so we can at least say they can turn on the stream if they work till 5:30?
Won't give up.
Who are these?
Who are these people that?
This resident, this
No.
specific resident.
Yeah. Are residents that are gainefully employed and they don't get to just be mayor?
All right, so, is there a consensus of time with respect to special called meeting, or is that something that needs to be determined per calendars of the mayor and council?
Listen, we're doing this a little informally, Mr. Chairman. So Willie, you're saying 5? There's a flex.
He said 5.
Yeah.
Lee?
He said 5.
Lee? 5. Michael says, people's calendar, we're gonna just put that on the record. You're flexible. I'm gonna join the 5 crowd.
To be clear, I'm flexible, I just think 6 would be better for most residents.
We vote on what Mike just said.
So,
This took longer than the.
Then the mission
so
statement.
with colleagues' permission, 5 o'clock next Wednesday, the 21st. Okay.
So I believe there was a desire to provide some type of formal motion and direction to
So
staff.
I'd like to
Councilmember
make,
Palermo.
I'd like to make a motion that we're gonna schedule a special called meeting for Wednesday, the 21st at 5 PM. And that staff is gonna update this document so that in the agenda for the meeting, we'll not have the document that we saw today, but it will be a combination between what we saw today and all the updates. I think for ease, it should not include red lines. Just at the end of the day, no need to see that 8 was crossed out. Just show us what staff sees as the consensus. And in the packet.
Michael, just to be clear, where we're landing as of now.
As of right now.
That's the
yes.
new document. correct?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly, without red lines, so we don't need to see that there was 8 that got shot down. In the packet, I think it should also have this really helpful thing, so we know where that half-mile piece is. And I think that's it. Am I missing anything else? Since we covered all the concessions things, staff is gonna include in the update.
All right, and that is your motion, sir?
That's my motion unless this committee says it's missing something.
Motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Vanstrom. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Very helpful discussion.
Now the easy one's out of the way, let's start the big stuff.
Over.
All right. Next item on the agenda is from Finance, consideration of the FY 2023 end-of-year budget amendment. That would be Ms. Williams and Mr. Luckett.
And you guys get no rest, do you? That finance department.
Thought everyone didn't have enough budget, so we thought we'd bring another budget for you to consider. So this is our end-of-year budget amendments, and Lynn is going to go through some of the details, but really this is just an opportunity for us to do some cleanup, last-minute kind of adjustments in the budget to close out fiscal year 2023. But I'll turn it over to Lynn, and she'll kind of walk you through the details.
Good evening. All right, so on here we have some adjustments in general fund, capital projects, state grant, group benefits, and hotel motel. So on this page I have the detail in general fund. We did want to recognize the sales tax revenue that is coming in above the revised budget currently. The interest has come in higher than what we had expected as well. The copier is being a lease recognition for accounting purposes, so this is just a transfer to general fund from some of the other funds so that we can recognize all of that in one fund rather than splitting it. The increased professional services, appraisals, we've got an increase in external legal fees, an increase in professional services, the insurance reimbursement from the storm damage of the ice storms, the travel training and equipment purchases using school zone funding. And then in capital projects, I have 2 items there. In the vehicle lease program, there is an auditing adjustment to recognize the entire asset so that we can depreciate from that. And that is those 2, for the vehicle lease and for Holly Hill. So, and then in state grant, we have the recycling densifier grant. Y'all have already seen when we applied for it, but we did need a budget amendment to actually start the grant for that. So this is $70,750 for that. In group benefits, this is the stop loss reimbursement back to us if there is expenses above a certain amount or the rebate. And so this was a little bit higher than what we had expected initially. So $250,000 there. And then in hotel motel, that revenue has come in well, and so this is recognizing the increase in revenue and the increase in the CBB portion of that. That is based on that percentage that we have. And then the next couple of slides are just a summary by fund, so that y'all can see that revenues and expenditures, and then revenues, what it was before, and variance, and then for expenditures.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. Just a couple questions.
Sure.
So remind me, so when something came in better than expected, what's the time frame of this again?
July 1st of
To 12/31.
to June 3rd of this year.
Oh, okay, so it is the entire year. Okay, so this is for the entire year.
The
that it came
current
in.
one we're in.
Okay, fantastic. And then, no, so meaning, it didn't come, so if it, that's actually, I guess, where my question is. So it's in the current year, so what's the state as of? I'm guessing it's not as of today.
It's projecting through based on actual so far, projecting through the end of the year.
Okay, so you're annualizing what's already happened? And then, and at what point did you look at from when it already happened?
Since the beginning of the fiscal year.
No, as in meaning, I'm guessing you don't have information from today. I'm guessing you don't have information from yesterday.
Right, so this is, for sales tax, for instance, we received, that would be payments through May, which would be activity through April.
So April 30th? Okay, that's helpful, thank you. And then, can we go back to the first slide that you had, Lynn, which is all very helpful? Wanted to see, okay, so the revenue increased to 32,000. Is that 32,000, is it that we don't project anything, and so 32,000 is the total amount?
So we have actually received more than that. This is what is over and above what's already been recognized, and what the police department is requesting to fund these two programs that they've used these funds for, equipment and training.
Gotcha. College. Okay. Thank you for this clarification, appreciate it.
Councilmember Hall.
This is just a follow-up to Councilmember Palermo's question. So the sales tax revenue, it's through actual sales in April that are reported in May, but you're projecting it out through June 30th. So basically, you're projecting May and June sales that we'll recognize.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And
Councilmember Vanstrom.
While we're on this slide, the increased funding for professional services, what was that for?
Yeah, that is for professional services that mayor and council authorized for some specific activities. Real estate, economic development related. Councilmember Beeson?
My understanding was that was included in last night's budget proposal. So is it going to be recognized in FY '23 or FY '24?
There was a recognition in last night for 24, should mayor and council decide that there should be expenditures in the FY '24 budget. This is for what's authorized in FY '23.
are we voting on that tonight? On that, we already voted on that.
The budget amendments?
No. So that 250 is that's the SORCOM money for FY '23. For FY '23. That 250 is the SORCOM money for FY '20, for fiscal year '23. And for some reason, is there something coming up tonight on that? Are we voting on something tonight on that? Are we already voted on it or something? I couldn't remember.
No, nothing tonight.
Okay, so this is the only place where it's being shown that everybody can see it. Okay, so Peter, to answer your question, that is the SORCOM money. And by the way, I was going to make a note, Ryan won't say this, so I was going to, when Michael kind of brought up, so what is the start and ending point? So obviously the ending point is June 30th. And you already know this, he's conservative. So Lynn and Ryan are trying to always pigeonhole some dollars in there because it's going to come in above $1 million. But they want to show you the most conservative numbers that they have. So you won't come back to them and say, well, I thought you said it was going to be $1 million, and it comes in at 933. It's probably going to come in at $1,070,000. But he's going to show it at $1 million, just to keep it safe. Sorry, don't mean to give your secrets away, but
Any additional questions? All right. Anything further? All right.
Nope.
So we'll ask if the budget amendment item can be brought forward for next council meeting. Do we have a motion?
Motion to move this forward.
Motion by Councilmember Hall. Second by Councilmember Morthland. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right. Next item on the agenda.
That's all you guys got? That's it?
Under Recreation and Parks, consideration to submit an FY 2024 application for grants for arts project grant from the National Endowment for the Arts.
Good evening, thank you. Yes, this agenda item is for a grant opportunity and the submittal of an application for a grant through the National Endowment for the Arts. The National Endowment for the Arts intends to fund art projects in the following disciplines: artist communities, art education, dance, design, folk and traditional arts, literary arts, local arts, media, and so forth. The grant that we would be proposing is for a 1-to-1 match. It would be $50,000 out of the grant contingency fund, as well as the grant itself would pay for $50,000 towards this opportunity. If selected for an award, the NEA funding would enable the Roswell Cultural Arts to present visually arresting fall and spring musicals. The first production will be a production of an autobiographical musical by Bone Hill, or called Bone Hill by Martha Redbone. Bone Hill is a touring play that would be booked and installed in the venue in the fall of 2024 and launch the theater component. Cultural Arts would then produce a Quilters production in March of 2025. Both productions would be bookending the 2024-2025 season and provide the framework for a cohesive and compelling story told through the year of live performances. Just to give you another example of what the context of these productions would include, it has a theme of home and history, as well as trying to focus on what makes a community. Where have we come from? How does that inform where we're going? These would all be the underlying concepts and thoughts behind these productions, which seem to match very well with Mayor and Council and the city's vision. As we look at this, we are looking for a vote of approval tonight to move forward with the application process, which the deadline for the application is due July 6th. If we make it to the second round, we would then move forward into the second round of that, which we would hopefully find out if we were awarded this grant early in 2024.
Mayor Wilson.
Steve, is that your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you
Happy
very
to
much.
answer any questions.
Always good to see you, Mr. Leatherman. Always a joy, actually a delight. Only question I got, so this has been done in coordination with the Parks and Recs liaison and the admin liaison, and they're fully up to speed and on board.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So basically, the request is that we be prepared to set aside $50,000 in hopes of getting a $50,000 grant and then have $100,000 to invest in some great art programs and projects. I guess, help me understand how this compares to both the production and entertainment, along with kind of the value and benefits of Georgia Ensemble. So basically, because it was my understanding that they would do a lot of this and without that much of the cost from the city. So help me understand kind of the differences or similarities between going in this direction versus Georgia Ensemble.
Sure. And overall, we have to be cautious of what the product and what the production value was compared to what we were moving from. This is obviously more conducive with the content that we're able to have a conversation about, specifically that home and community theme and concept, as well as this becomes more of like a turnkey opportunity with a more nationally renowned show from the Bone Hill. That's a little more well-known, I would say, in the community of theater production. The value is what I would consider to be a little bit higher value from a production look and how we kind of present that, as well as we would have an opportunity to recoup some of the ticket sales and what might be coming in through that ticket revenue. That was never really a realistic concept or thought that we had with Georgia Ensemble Theater.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is great production here, nationally renowned, and although I don't like having to pay $50,000 when we had an arrangement where we weren't having to pay that, the difference is that with this, we'd be able to recoup 100% of the ticket sales?
Correct. Now, full disclosure, we don't know that that would be the 50,000.
I'm guessing it would not add up to 50,000.
But
Maybe a gap there.
there would be a gap there.
Yeah.
Now, Councilmember Hall.
I just have a question for how the difference gets shored up. Basically, it says most of these grants are 25,000. I know we're hoping to get 50, but if we get 25, do we have to have 25 or 75,000 out of our fund?
So
It's
if we were only
$100,000.
awarded the 25 versus the requested 50, I think staff and we would have to come back to the table to ensure that these were the productions that we would be looking at. I don't know that we would be coming back and requesting an additional 25,000 to gap up that request.
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. I really like this lineup, and I like adding a new, fresh approach to what we're producing from the Cultural Arts Center for our residents. I think that we've been offered a nice opportunity and dates opening up, and I appreciate you all bringing this to us to fill in those dates, those prime dates that are open for us. So I think they'll be well received, and I think we will attract a lot of new customers as well as some of our returning patrons to the arts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any guests? Councilmember Morthland.
As the mayor alluded to earlier, we've been as part of the planning process and the original discussions on this. Both of these shows fit a really good need for us. It goes into the communities that we're trying to embrace and bring arts, bring play to them. This is a really good thing, and as we discussed before, if the 50 is not there and the 25 is there, then that's, we'll come back and we'll start dealing with that. It's not going to be we get 25 and we're on the hook for an additional 25. That's very much of a planning process, but this is a good thing. And then lastly, as I leave this, I would like to welcome Mr. Malone back to the table, because the last time he was here, we talked about lawnmowers and River Rock out in front of Mimosa Hall.
It's good to be back.
Looking for a win on this one.
All right. Okay. All right, with that, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to move this board.
Motion by Councilmember Morthland.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And then the, final item on this committee for the evening, under Community Development, item number 6, consideration of the transmittal of the short-term work program and capital improvement element to the Atlanta Regional Commission and the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. I think you may have been briefed on this one previously, but obviously we need to bring this forward for committee discussion. Ms. Dybel and Mr. Gaines.
Yes, good evening. What we've got here is the capital improvement element and short-term work program, the annual update that is required to go through the state and the Atlanta Regional Commission. So, City of Roswell is recognized as a qualified local government. We collect impact fees, which are used by public safety, rec and parks, and transportation for capital projects. Each year, we're required to submit our capital improvement element due to the collection of impact fees. And a short-term work program is a requirement of the submittal with the CIE. On the screen here is just an example. You do have the attachments in your packet.
including the capital improvement element. This is a list of projects that is brought forward by transportation, police, fire, and recreation and parks. And these are projects that are allowed to use impact fees that are collected through the building permit process. The short-term work program is a list of projects and recommendations to be implemented over a 5-year time frame. This is a different set. This is also included in your backup. This is just a sample from the list. What they do is to show what we've got in our comprehensive plan, and the state and the Atlanta Regional Commission just wants to make sure that we're following missions and goals and everything that the city is looking to move forward for. On your list, as you can see at the top, you do notice that some of it is in red and some of it's in green. The red is what's deleted each year. The green is normally added, and of course the black and white will be staying the same. The Planning Commission did hear this item and made a recommendation for transmittal. And I'll get to that in a minute. The Mayor and Council hearing is to transmit the document to the ARC and DCA. After it's transmitted, it's reviewed by ARC and DCA. Once the state has indicated that they have approved it, we then advertise it and place it on a mayor and council agenda for adoption. We are required to adopt by October 31st of each year. Then the adopting resolution is sent back to the Atlanta Regional Commission and the state sends us a letter to indicate that we have qualified local government status for that year. As stated, the Planning Commission did make a recommendation already for transmittal. They did have one item with their approval, was to remove Roswell Inc. as one of the departments on the short-term work program. So that was their recommendation. If approved for moving forward tonight, we hope that this will be placed on the June 26th Mayor and Council agenda for approval of the transmittal of the documents. Do you have any questions?
Councilmember Beeson.
Quick question for clarification. For this site currently, did they indicate the reason why for removing Roswell Inc.?
Well, they believe that since now there's an economic development department that's been added into the city, they felt that they should be the department listed. So that was the reason.
Separate entity. Got it. Thank you.
We didn't have one when we did this a year ago, so it was kind of just being implemented at that time. So that was the reasoning.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this question is for you or if this question is for RDOT. Just in seeing your presentation, just want to know from the more detailed list can you remind me from a sidewalk standpoint, would the sidewalks be covered near where Highway 9 and Holcomb Bridge meet, like Commerce in that area?
I believe that was one of the ones you asked for, and it's been added to the list.
Okay, so Councilman Vanstrom, that was for you where I was asking, and obviously for the city of just keeping the potential up. And again, as a reminder for everybody, just because something's on a list here doesn't mean any of the money ever goes towards it. But if it's not on the list, it means the money can never go towards it until the list is updated the following year. Correct, yes, it does not have to go towards it. It does not mean any project is happening or anything like that. It just means if it's on the list, then this mayor and council has the opportunity to apply impact fees. And what I'm hearing from staff is it does cover the Commerce Way area.
If you look at page in your packet for the CIE, on page 4 of 6.
Which packet page is it?
I'm sorry, I'm not on the packet page.
Okay.
It's in the capital improvement element, so it should be one of the.
It is page 4 of 6.
Page 4 of 6. The 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth item down, it's in green because it's brand new. It says Commerce Parkway Corridor and Bike Ped Improvements. That's the one you requested to be added. So it's on the list.
And it's our very focused liaison over economic development was the one bringing that up when I was having some other sidewalk discussions. So I'm glad this is on there.
All right. Mayor Wilson.
Yeah, just to add, I know Jason Jackie and Lenore, you guys have been working on this for a long time. Thank you for bringing this up. I know Michael, thank you, and Peter, you've been working on this. I'm surprised, like, there's the recommendation for Roswell Inc. It's a surprise, like, where's that come from? And I guess it's the ARC. But this is a very simple matter. Sounds complicated, but really, we're just saying, hey, can we apply some of our impact fees to places that we haven't been applying them to historically? That's really all this is.
If we so choose in the future.
If we so choose.
Yep.
That's right. Not a guarantee, just can you, if you decide to, do you have the opportunity to do that?
That's all it is. You're correct.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion. Motion by Councilmember Beeson. Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Second by Councilmember Morthland. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, I do want to make one quick correction. We do have an item number 7 on this committee, the addendum item, item number 7, discussion of memorandums of understanding with Roswell Inc., Visit Roswell, Roswell Arts Fund, the Roswell Beautification Project, and the Roswell Historical Society.
Do we
Mr.
have another committee meeting after this?
We do.
Okay.
Public Safety and Public Works, that is correct, sir.
Okay. So I don't see public safety here.
Public,
They're in the next room,
they're,
right, Panic?
they're, yeah, they're,
I thought it was a requirement, you had to sit through the entire committee
They're
meeting.
listening right next to you, there's just a lot of
they're monitoring. So item number 7, discussion of memorandums of understanding with Roswell Inc., Visit Roswell, Roswell Arts Fund, Roswell Beautification Project, and the Roswell Historical Society. Mr. Davidson will ask for a brief summation.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. The first one that we have is Roswell, Visit Roswell, by and through the Roswell Economic Development and Tourism, Inc. The main change in this one would be to provide office space for Visit Roswell within City Hall, unless mayor and council determine otherwise, and they would be required to utilize such space. The other changes are basically typo changes from last year's, and also just updating the dates to refer to this year instead of last year. The next one is Roswell Inc. Again, changes the dates. It has the city providing office space in City Hall or as otherwise determined by mayor and council, and Roswell Inc. utilizing the office space that the city provides. The next one is the Roswell Arts Fund. This one is a little more, changed a little more than the other ones. This one, actually, I just saw another item that needs to be changed to number 3 on page 2 on this one. It needs to say the Roswell Arts Fund agrees to do the following during fiscal year 2024 instead of 2023. I'll make that change if these move forward. We've taken out some of the actual specific projects. However, we've included the overall vision, having them do the implement the second year of the 4-year PAMP vision. This also provides that they will have office space within City Hall, and they will utilize that space. The next agreement is the Historical Society. There's really no changes in this one. Last year, it already provided that they have office space upstairs at the Cultural Arts Center for library and archives facility. And the last one is the Historic Roswell Beautification Project. Again, it updates the dates and provides for office space within City Hall, and that they will utilize the office space within City Hall unless otherwise determined by mayor and council. those are the changes.
All right. Questions or comments?
With the understanding that each of the organizations that were outlined, Roswell Arts Fund, Roswell Beautification Project, Roswell Historical Society, I think those are all 501c3 organizations. Roswell Inc., I'm not sure about CVB, I assume they probably share a joint 501c6 status, with the understanding that they would be relocated into City Hall. With any of those tax exempt statuses preclude them, walk a fine line. My understanding is there's usually a very heavy firewall between C3 organizations and C6 organizations and location on government property, or this idea that the government is controlling those organizations. Is there any issue with that?
This doesn't talk about control of the organization. The organization would still be free to operate as their boards determine. This simply saves them money, gives them space within City Hall, gives them more access to the staff that they're using daily, when they do their work.
I guess saving money would only be applicable to some of those, because Roswell Arts Fund, they don't pay for their office space,
True.
it's donated. And I don't believe there is any office space for Roswell Beautification Project. I could be wrong.
Councilmember Hall.
Just to add on the C status, whether it's C3, 4, or 6, those are elections, they're tax elections, so really have nothing to do with mission, operating, location. It's a tax choice.
I guess with that, I've been on the board for several of those types of organizations. There's, I realize it's a tax exempt status, but for example, a C3 can never advocate for a certain policy, for example. Even though it's a tax exempt status, you would have to be a C4 organization in order to do that, otherwise it's illegal. I'm not super sure about the C6 status because those do involve public-private partnerships, but that is a concern of mine. The visualization or the understanding or the implication that by housing them at City Hall, it's hard to maintain their independent status that way.
Further comments? Councilmember Palermo.
I just want to say, I mean, I disagree with that opinion. I don't think it'd be hard to keep an independent status if they're housed at City Hall. I think it's showing financial responsibility to the taxpayers that this group that the taxpayers fund, they are going to get free space instead of having to take our money to get space somewhere else. So I think independence and location are two separate discussions.
Council. Clarification from City Attorney.
Yeah, and basically, we're already entering into partnership agreements with them. So the relationship is going to be set out in the agreements already. So it's not
Councilmember Beeson.
There really isn't a cost savings there because my understanding is Roswell Beautification Project doesn't have an office. Roswell Arts Fund has a free office. Roswell Historical Society is based out of the Cultural Arts Center through their museum because they're already existing there. The exception being Roswell Inc. and Visit Roswell. Visit Roswell, as we just saw, we literally just approved it. They have that money coming in through our hotel tax fund. Separately, which I guess we already have line item, but separately Roswell Inc., I think I'm gonna be wrong on this. I'm gonna just say eyeball, 38% of their budget comes from City of Roswell through those funds. The remaining 60 whatever percent of their funds, they acquire on their own. So in that case, you could pretend that their rent came out of the 60 whatever percent that they're providing or they're raising on their own. To me, it's kind of a non-point to bring them in City Hall. I understand the goal of trying to provide support, resources, unity, alignment, all of these really beautiful corporate terms that are thrown out all the time. However, we've never even benchmarked a single one of these organizations as to what we define as success. We've never told Roswell Inc. that these are your KPIs that we're aiming towards. We haven't told the Visitors Bureau that our goal is to have X number of people or whatever it is. I think ideally we should be defining success before we tell these organizations, not ask them, but require them to be housed in what I would call a fishbowl where we just stare at them as politicized leaders. I do like the fact that they are housed separately outside of the city, especially because they're tax exempt nonprofit organizations. I think it decreases the level of politicization that can happen. And I do appreciate the fact that they're all wholly independent organizations that are partners with us, not entities. As we just saw in the last slide deck with ComDev, even the Atlanta Regional Commission did not recognize Roswell, Inc. as being part of the city. They are an independent C6 organization. So for us to try to imply otherwise, it's not necessarily true. I would rather continue to recognize their independence.
Mayor Wilson?
This is one of those simple ideals I wish we would have thought of 18 months ago. If we had thought of this 18 months ago, I think we would be farther ahead in a whole bunch of ways. I'm really excited about the potential of having our partner organizations come into City Hall with us. I think it is such a huge benefit to the organizations. I think it's such a huge benefit, and I disagree a little bit, Sarah, with some of the language that you use in terms of the colorful corporate language, which I agree with you, I have a challenge with sometimes as well. But I can say in our own instance, in our own lifetime here, in the past 18 months that we've been elected, I can tell you that the culture has changed internally in this city. It's changed between the staff and the elected leadership. It's changed because of the proximity of the engagement of the relationships. And I think, and I would say that, you know, there is a lot of politicization that happens in the city, and it's part of our jobs to help end that and to create an atmosphere where we just do the right thing, and that we may have disagreed about what the right thing is, but that we come to consensus on doing the right thing. And I'm excited about that, and particularly along the lines of our partner organizations, because they have been part of a very engaged, often difficult political debate in the past. And I'd like to end that. I'd like for us to end that. And I think that they'll have tremendous more credibility because they'll be more engaged, they'll be more active, there'll be more actual, real, not only just relationship building. It's kind of like the stick-it note. Those of us in business know that sometimes the best ideas happen by accident, they happen by proximity, they happen by the occasional conversation that you weren't intending to have, and that happens with people being together. The other thing is for me, this is going to help the partner organizations be able to navigate better the resources of the city. I think the city resources are going to be much more available. I honestly wish we had thought of this 18 months ago. I think we would have solved some problems that we still are discussing and not completely in unanimity about. They would have been gone. And particularly along the economic lines, because as we're creating the new stratagem of the economic development stratagem for the city, sorry to be redundant, that is being done with two city council people, the economic liaison, Peter Benstrom, the finance liaison, Christine Hall. It's being done with the head of Roswell, Inc. It's being done with the head of Roswell CBB. It is being led and it's being done with the COO of the city, Rich Reinhardt. And it's being done and being facilitated by the consultant that we've hired, Peter Surkoff, the principal for SEER. And to me, it's such a significant statement for us as a group to say, to include them, and the proximity of the relationship, the proximity of engagement, the proximity of ideal making and things, it's going to have a profound effect positively on this city. If I were on the other side of this equation, I would be excited. I'm on this side of the equation, and I can't tell you how genuinely excited and beneficial I think it's going to be for the city, for us as elected officials, for the staff talent of the city, and for the partner organization. I just really think I wish we'd done it 18 months ago. That's 2 cents.
Council Member Beeson.
Quick question, based off say that if you were on the other side, have any of the partner organizations received these draft MOUs and provided feedback?
To your point, so that's the reason we're doing this, Sarah, tonight in committee is because we knew, I knew that not everybody agreed on this. So I figured this needed to be a public conversation and a public debate before it got sent to the MOUs. So the partner organizations, to my knowledge, and Lee and I had I may be wrong on the Roswell Art Funds, because I said, Lee, I don't think they've gone, and she told me yesterday, Kurt, I think it has gone, and I'm saying, Lee, I don't think it has gone. So I don't want to answer but it was my understanding, because last week I was saying, David, we got to get these to council, because they haven't gone to the partner organizations. So realizing, conversation with Peter about Jimenez, I don't want to send these to the partner organizations unless the council has a full breadth discussion on it.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the public process that this is coming to committee before it's sent to them. I think from this committee, I think it should be sent to the partner orgs, but I think without a doubt, we should be having a public vote and agreeing upon what's in there. As for the discussion on the office space, it's already working really well with the Roswell Historical Society. We give them money to operate, and we don't have to give them money for rent. So that's less money that we're giving them, which I think is a good thing. And I don't think there's any questions of independence or anything else. And I think it's a great community situation for us to be giving that office space to Roswell Historical Society. I actually want to talk about something different. So Mr. Davidson, in the Roswell Inc. One and the CVB one, it mentions and this is not a new part, so this is not highlighted in yellow. It just mentions that prior to any nomination, that it would come to closure for city council. And what I was surprised to see there, I thought it would be nomination for appointment or reappointment, but it only says appointment. Is that because appointment is considered a reappointment, or is that an oversight where it really should be appointment or reappointment?
It's probably an oversight.
Okay.
I think the original intent was for new members that were being appointed.
No, I think it was I think the intent in the discussions were all for all appointments, whether new appointment or reappointment. And so that's where I would like to see us clarifying that and correcting that, where it's for nomination of appointment or reappointment.
I can make that change.
Councilmember Beeson.
I looked around, my understanding is surrounding cities don't house, I'll use their CVB, their Visitors Bureau, in our case, Visit Roswell. We don't necessarily have a lot of C6 organizations around here, like Roswell Inc. The same with Historical Society. But do we have any examples of other cities who house these outsider partner organizations within their city hall component? Because to my knowledge, nothing locally, like Alpharetta, everything's around the corner. Sandy Springs, everything's around the corner. Like their Visitors Bureau. It's really close to City Hall. You could walk to City Hall. You could walk to CVB right now. But they're not in-house as to create some level of independence. Do we have any examples otherwise?
I just want to give the example that Roswell's unique in having a group like Roswell Inc., whereas there's other cities where their pure, full economic development focus is housed within City Hall through employees. But obviously Roswell Inc. is different and separate, and they are a partner, and I think they're a great partner, and I think they'll hopefully enjoy saving the money as well as just being really a part of City Hall.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
Yeah, I'd like to just take what Mayor Wilson said just a step further. We have put together a really incredible looking group for economic development study and real estate of economic development. And I just find it frustrating that we're making a decision on real estate and economic development before we've gone through any process with this group. Mr. Sarkoff has been sick for 3 or 4 weeks, and that put us behind. We met one time. And I would like to further study where Roswell Inc. completely fits into the picture of economic development, how a P3 partnership is truly expected to function within the city, and have all those parameters defined by the group that's being formed before I make a decision as to where they should be located. And that's just, and everyone knows that's my opinion, and I really stand by that, because why is there, it's not that important that we make a decision to move them until we've taken the time to explore, is it truly a benefit economically? Are there things they do independently that are beneficial independently and would be best not even near the umbrella of the city? I don't know. Well, in fact, I do. I think there are some things they do that are outside the realm, and I'd rather not have them at City Hall, but I think we all need to explore that a little more. I may be convinced, after all the studying that goes on and all the discussion of how Roswell Inc. works with our new economic development director and his growing team, that they do belong in City Hall. I'm not saying I don't think they don't. They do or don't. I'm saying at this point, I would rather have the time to let the committee that's been created explore the concept first before that decision is made.
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. To Councilmember Vanstrom and Beeson, council members, I'm confused on the independence emphasis on that, because both entities were created as an arm of the city. And to bounce back to Roswell Arts Fund, in talking with both the board director and the person that's running, so Ilan and Scott, they feel like this is a great investment, a further investment in the city into that organization, which is our designated art agency for the city. And yes, they fundraise for separate things as well. So it's it's not the same, I don't want to make it the same, but it's very similar. But without the city, neither would really probably be in existence. So just help me out, not challenging, well, I'm challenged a little bit because I want to understand where you're coming from, but where you're pulling apart the independent piece, because I feel like everything that Roswell Arts Fund does impacts the city and is a representation of the city and an extension of the city through direction by us. And I feel the same way, correct me if I'm on the wrong path, but with Roswell Inc. and with Visit Roswell. If I could open that up to either of you, please.
Councilmember Beeson.
I'll respond. Roswell Inc. wasn't entirely created just by the city. It was a public-private partnership that originally transitioned from a different group. So there was a smaller group originally that transitioned into a public-private partnership, I guess, between the city and Roswell Inc. Roswell Inc. has their own wholly controlled entity. It's not an economic development department that's housed here within City Hall. Props to y'all for creating that last year and actually creating a department that does focus on that because that's been a gap housed here at City Hall in the past. As for Roswell Arts Fund, in my discussions with them too, my understanding is that eventually they want to be able to grow that scope outside of just being solely focused as, Roswell's arts arm. Secondarily, we do have a cultural affairs and arts department or division within the city government that functions quite a bit differently. So in my mind, they are independent boards and organizations up until last year. I guess with y'all changing the MOUs, they could appoint their own people. I say this as somebody who used to be on the board for Roswell Inc. I think that it does function quite well independently. And I think, to me, it begs the larger question. It's been phrased, Roswell Arts Fund. You said if you were Roswell Inc., you would be jumping at the ability to be able to be housed in City Hall and save, I guess, on the overhead. With Roswell Arts Fund already has a free office. If they would be so supportive of this relocation, why is it phrased as a requirement and not as an option?
Councilmember Palermo.
So I'd like to say two things. So first of all, I want to clarify the history of Roswell Inc. So it did start with a different mindset and thought process, but it was very much a public-private partnership because at the beginning, the goal was it was going to be the city funding them for 3 years, and then they would become self-sustainable by the businesses funding them. That was not possible. The Roswell businesses were not able or willing to fund them to the needs that they had. So the city never stopped funding them, despite the original goal of just the 3 years of funding. So that's the history. And at the end of the day, I didn't say jumping. I just don't use that in my terminology. I said I think they'd be happy to be saving the rent. At the end of the day, of course, everybody would rather receive more money, receive more revenue, and get to be in at a place 100% of their choice. At the same time, I think we have a fiduciary responsibility that we are using taxpayer money to fund an organization, and I think it makes a lot more sense that we're not paying extra to help out on rent. Again, going back to the Roswell Historical Society. Roswell Historical Society asks us to fund them, we fund them, and they don't ask us for rent. They don't have money going towards rent because we're giving them that free location. I think it's worked out really well, and I think it makes sense knowing that if we're funding a group, rent does not need to be one of those things, because frankly, we have space where they can completely keep their independence, perhaps get a lot of benefits for being closer to those they work with, and I think it will be a win-win.
Yes, Councilmember Hall, and then we'll get back.
And I just want to add, yes, we did start an economic development division with the hiring of our economic development director, Daryl, last year. And the benefit of him being able to work with Roswell Inc. hand in hand, it's just, I mean, Mayor nailed it on the head. I mean, it's when you're in proximity of someone, the idea is the collaboration. I work for an 8,000 employee firm that post-COVID, we're trying to get, the theme is better together, and that's what companies are trying to do, to get their folks back into the offices instead of working remotely, because they recognize the benefit of the collaboration, of being close together, of the proximity, of going to lunch together, having a cup of coffee at each other's desk right there. So that is my feeling about it. I feel very, very strongly about it. It will also help with the direction. If they're floundering with direction, they can speak with Daryl. As council members, we're not here all the time, but, so they can certainly reach Councilmember Vanstrom by phone. But having the mayor here, having a city administrator, having people that can help them with things is just a tremendous benefit.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
To address Councilwoman Hills, there are things that Roswell Inc. as an independent organization is able to do as an outside arm beyond in communication and in correspondence with businesses and companies that we may not be able to do at certain points in certain stages of development. And so there are times that they are very, very valuable as a separate organization to us. And that's from the economic standpoint, and that is different than the Arts Fund. Because there's just, we get to a point with project development where we can no longer discuss anything with the developers. And Roswell Inc., as an independent organization, has that capability. And so that is helpful. And so I hope I'm answering your question, because that's that answer. The other one is, Councilwoman Hall, Steve and Daryl have had a great relationship all year. Steve's only 2 minutes away, and they have coffee every day.
So what kind of things are things that we can't, as a city, communicate with Roswell Inc. that Daryl would not be able to do? Like, does that preclude him?
Because he's on staff, right?
David, am I correct? He's on
I
staff.
don't understand what we can't discuss with,
Staff can work with developers during projects as well, so it's us that don't want to be getting involved if they have an application coming to us. But comm dev staff, all throughout the application process, they're working closely with developers and complex projects and all that.
and maybe legal?
Yeah, so staff can still discuss stuff with developers, but they convey individual council members' kind of feelings and stuff, but not speaking as a body. Roswell Inc. has the ability to take people out to dinner. They can do other things where the city doesn't go and have a budget to go take somebody to dinner and wine and dine CEOs of companies or such.
But the location of their office wouldn't preclude that.
No,
And
no.
their finances are still accountable to, they're still accountable to their bookkeeping and parameters. So I'm unclear on the independence piece on that. Again, I'm just trying to understand what your perspective is on that.
Mayor Wilson.
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised that there's a conundrum. I think I probably, as well as anybody in the city, as a private resident and as an elected official, is really, really in tune with this problem that I don't really want to articulate at large. And I really see this as a gigantic way of solving the problem. And I see this as a peace offering. I see it as an olive branch. I really do. I mean, I see this as a way of, that a year from now, that Roswell Inc. will have more credibility in the discussions. I really believe that. And that, because I don't have to tell anybody in here, all 7 of us understand the dynamics. If I didn't think this would make it better for the relationship for Roswell, Inc., I would not be proposing it. I wouldn't. And Peter, you make a very salient point about, hey, are you getting the cart for the horse? That's a salient point. I can't disagree with that, man. I really see this as a practical solution for them. And in terms of healing, because they're still, it's going to, we've struggled this year, all of us have, on the economic front, because we're still in the first, we're just getting through the second iteration. And we're better than we were, 2 years ago. We're better than we were 12 months ago. We're still figuring it out. And I really believe that I want Steve in the room. I want Andy in the room. I want them as part of the ongoing discussion. I really do. And not excluding them. And it's got to be with Daryl. It's got to be with you. It's got to be with the council. It's got to be with Rich. It's got to be with Randy. Got to be Ryan, right? It's got to be with Leatherman. It's got to be with Littlefield. I mean, they've got to, just more active engagement. You've kind of heard, like, I've always said I want Steve in the room because of, one, his historical knowledge. It's kind of like Davidson. I always want Davidson in the room because of historical knowledge. It just can add pieces to the discussion sometimes to lay the land that the rest of us can't. And part of this is like, when you have an economic organization, and you brought it up earlier, Sarah, well, we haven't given any KPIs. And you're so right. And the truth of the matter is, we're not prepared to give KPIs today. We're not. Because we really haven't figured out the overall economic stratagem, which is what you guys are going to do. And out of that, we'll come out of clarity. But I'm serious, and I think there's been buy-in from our colleagues. But this really is an olive branch, man, I promise you. And I think it's going to matter to them. I think a year from now, it's going to look like the easiest no-brainer we ever did. That's just my 2 cents.
Councilmember Beasley.
Hear you. With that, can it be an understanding that we are offering space within City Hall and not requiring space within City Hall? I hear you, Councilmember Palermo, on the fiduciary responsibility of making sure that we're spending taxpayer dollars wisely. Frankly, that's why, despite the fact these are 3-year MOUs, we've had them come back every single year and present their budget to us, and we hold that MOU over their head to say, is this financially responsible with the taxpayer dollars that we are going to endow to your organization as a partner, not as a subsidiary of the government. If we, as mayor and council, decided that it wasn't the best and highest use of tax dollars, then we would not, in that situation, give that annual budget. That's why they come and do that tap dance number that they came and did about a month ago. So we are being financially responsible. So with that, if it's an olive branch, I like to extend my olive branches as an offering and not as a requirement. Can that be the understanding with our partner organizations?
Councilmember Banstrom.
Oh, I'm sorry, I could also add to that. You could, and I think that's a gracious way to handle this person. I don't know why it has to be this or not. Secondly, offer them, if rent's so important, have them take the rent out of the budget.
Councilmember Palermo.
At the end of the day, we're funding them a significant amount of money, and I don't want a shell game of them saying, all right, we'll just say the rent is from this pile of money and just pretend it's not being affected by yours. I do want to see us minimizing the amount of tax dollars that we have to go to any organization while also maximizing the benefit to the community. And I don't think the location outside of City Hall is that much of a great benefit to the community. I think it frankly makes no difference. So the only difference it makes is the rent, and let's save the taxpayers that money. And yeah, just going back to, well, could it just be an offer versus a requirement? The easiest thing to always do is just the status quo. If you've been paying rent, it actually is pretty easy, especially if it's not your own money. The easiest thing is to keep on paying rent. And by having a requirement, I think actually this is gonna increase our fiduciary responsibility. increase their fiduciary responsibility, give some amazing benefits, give them some amazing credibility and legitimacy. And so I think it seems reasonable to know that we're giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we're giving them access and a home in City Hall as well.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
And I greatly appreciate that. And I would love us to take a real financial responsibility and realize we paid $250,000 to a consultant to look at real estate and economic development. We're promising to pay him another $250,000 and possibly more next year. And I've not heard him yet weigh in on whether a P3 belongs in City Hall, belongs independent. What are the benefits? What are the not benefits? Can't we just wait until we find out from our consultant that we're paying so much money and his team that he's creating, whether this is a good idea, and not just be the elected body who is making this decision and not utilizing the staff that we've created to make these decisions? I don't understand why we can't utilize the person we've hired to utilize.
I'd like to make a compromise, actually. Not saying, don't know if others would agree with it. I don't know if you'd agree with it or anybody else would agree with it. I think the reason we're discussing this timing right now is because we are under the gun for these MOUs. And so what I'd propose is we do include it as a requirement, but once we get with that consultant, et cetera, have those conversations, if there's good reason that this is a bad idea, then we can always change it. Because Mr. Davidson, even though we do it at this time frame, aligned with the budget, et cetera, throughout the year, anytime, if both parties agreed, we could always amend an MOU, right? If both parties agreed?
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Hall.
And fellow council members, we were in the meeting, Councilmember Vanstrom and I were in the meeting with the consultant and with Steve Stroud, with Andy, and several other senior members of our team. And bringing together, that was the first bringing together of everybody under one roof, basically. And that was the intent. And that's what I understand the intent of our consultant was. So it's moving towards that, where we're together. We had that meeting. It was a fabulous kickoff meeting. Unfortunately, he did fall ill for the last few weeks, but I thought that meeting was great. It was great synergy, and that's what we're looking for more of. That synergy here, we're together, we're better together, we're one body.
Mayor Wilson.
I'm points well made, but here's, flip the table. I'm perplexed, really, if I'm thinking everybody's jumping on this one, this is a no-brainer, this is good for everybody. Everybody's happy. Everybody's going to be happy. Everybody sees us as a winner. And I'm confused because I feel like we're arguing some technical points to not do it. And so the real question is, so I would say, so why don't you want to do it? What's the problem with doing it? I don't understand. Don't you want to be here? Don't you want access to him? Access to him? Access to him all the time? Access to, my gosh, ComDev, where they left us, didn't they? You still here? Don't you want access to them all the time? I'm just thinking oh my gosh, it's such a no-brainer. I guess I'm confused why it's not. Why it's just not easy. And I'm guessing you guys are feeling you're representing some perspectives, maybe for some folks that are Roswell Inc. and Roswell V, because I don't know. All I've done is I brought up the issue to them, said, I'd really like you to do this. Please think about it.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
No, I think just, that's well said and well put, and that's why I think it's, would you like to? Here's your option. Why is it a 3-year MOU that a year later we're waving in somebody's face saying, you have to do this? That's what I don't understand. If we're so afraid, we're so convinced this is such a great thing for everybody, why is it like a demand that in order to get your money, you've got to do this? Why isn't it just, hey, this is, and Councilwoman Hall, if bringing everyone together, that's gonna start to be a great feeling for everybody, and Economic Development Director and Steve from Roswell Inc. and Andy here from CVB, and they all start seeing that spending so much time together, and all of a sudden that evolves into some great thing that they all agree, hey, you guys were right, we should get it together, we should move in here. Then that just evolves nice and natural versus this has to happen. That's That's my real upset with the whole thing is, why does this have to be something that's held over everybody's head? Why isn't it something that just naturally evolves? Because if we're as confident as I think we all are, that we are going to end up coming together and making this an incredible economic development team. So why can't that organically happen with an invitation versus a demand?
Councilmember Beeson.
I'm surprised that you're surprised. I think from the time that we originally got the draft MOUs, and to my knowledge, with the exception of maybe Arts Fund, the partner organizations still have not reviewed these MOUs yet. I have reviewed it from the time that we received it at the end of last week in a group message. It was, hey, did you get this? Anybody, are we good to go? And I said immediately, no, I'm not. The only change that was on there I don't like. I wasn't thrilled with last year's, I wasn't on council at the time. I didn't like last year's change either, that mayor and council has to approve their boards. I'm gonna be entirely frank with you. I used to be on the board for Roswell Inc. Not with this mayor and council, not with previous mayor and council. For lack of a better word, hell would have frozen over before I ever would have made it onto that board. But I would like to think that I contributed diversity of presence by diversity of thought in my contributions to that organization. But because I didn't have certain political ties, I never would have quite made it there. And I like that separation. To answer y'all about the independence, that's an example of compromised independence when we're breathing down their back. Now, instead of figuratively breathing down their back, we physically want to breathe down their back when we just stare at them in their office or say, hey, I know you're working on something completely separate. I want to bring you into this meeting. Frankly, if I were an employee, an executive director, or what have you, of an independent organization, I would be of the frame of mind, like, schedule a meeting. I can just as easily walk over to City Hall and not stop what I'm doing to go have some fun water cooler conversations. I hear you that it's an olive branch and you're trying to make it more inclusive and we're trying to encapsulate them within a goal that we're all trying to achieve together. But I will reiterate, that's fine. I would rather phrase the relocation as an offering. If you have an office in City Hall, not a requirement. Personally, I like to offer my olive branches with one hand and not a gun against their head in the other. I like to offer it with good faith effort that I am trying to reach out to them. And if they don't want to, that's cool.
Councilmember Palermo.
Change is hard, and so ultimately I totally get it why someone would decide to not make a change, even if making that change actually has so many different benefits. And so if it is just a, hey, you can come and have this free office space at City Hall, then I actually don't believe there'd ever be that change, because it's so much easier for all of us, for humans, to just do what we're doing and feel that something's working, et cetera. It's not a gun to the head. We are great partners, and we give them hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And I just really don't think it's unreasonable. It works really well with the Roswell Historical Society, as mentioned earlier. There's gonna be a lot of different benefits, and I think we've had a great long discussion. I think I've heard lots of good points from everybody here. Number of points I agree with, number of points I disagree with, but I think all points were reasonable, legitimate, fair, and at the end of the day, I think this is us having a fiduciary responsibility for our taxpayers, creating a great, successful environment for our partners. And again, as I mentioned, I stand by. If we have a consultant coming in here, we're really focusing on revamping how we do economic development, and they say it's a bad idea, which I'd be surprised by given what I heard regarding the synergies and that goal and all that stuff. This could always be changed. We can always just change and say, you know what, let's rework it, but let's save the taxpayers money, let's save them money for a year. And with that, unless people feel there's really a lot of points that have not been mentioned yet, I'd love the opportunity to make a motion, given that we do have another committee to do this tonight. So if it's all right, I would like to make a motion to move these forward as written, including the yellow updates, and also just the clarification and correction on it was appointment and reappointment in the two MOUs as well. So making that one change, which we had discussed with them last year and was the way that it was discussed with them ahead of time. But and again, thank you for this public process, because I feel the mayor I feel Councilmember Hall, Councilmember Vanstrom, Councilmember Beeson, Councilmember Hills, Councilmember Northland, and myself, I feel each of us did not have the authority to send draft agreements that were not really even agreed upon by us. So I do feel this is the right public process, and they're gonna have something that's gone through a public discussion. And in my motion, I motion that that staff immediately makes these updates, sends this to the public, to the partner orgs, and this is at the next regularly scheduled mayor and council meeting. That's my motion, if this committee is okay with that.
I'm sorry,
So my motion is that we move forward, and what move forward means is, so we're clarifying and correcting the item where it was missing appointment and reappointment. And so it's got all the other language that's within here, and that staff is gonna then send these over to the partner organizations, and that this will be on the next regularly scheduled mayor and council meeting. If that works for this committee, I can gladly change my motion if that's preferred, but it sounds like there's a second.
We have a motion and a second. Want a question or clarification or discussion?
So does your point that you brought up before about the consultant that we have on hand, when we're talking about these being a 3-year scenario, and are we gonna put this back in front of him and say, is this the right move? And if he says no, then we come back and we change the MOU?
So
Are we talking about that tonight, or are we not talking about that?
So what I'm envisioning, because I think it was a great point, is this is a complex, long discussion. It's not a matter of a consultant looks at it and says, yep, or nope. It's more of, as analysis is done and we're seeing what direction economic development is going in, et cetera, that if we see actually there's an even better opportunity, and who knows what that might be, is that I'll tell you right now, I personally fully support and would want to bring back to committee ASAP, us looking and reaching out and looking to amend it if it's something they agree with, only if they agree with, only if both parties are agreeing. But I don't see that as a part of the motion. I see that more as what I see as common sense and due diligence, that this is our time to make an MOU. And if this is not a great idea, we can always mutually agree to change the MOU. But I do think it seems like the right thing for the city and the right thing for our taxpayer, and will turn into a great thing for our.
I'm gonna make a supposition. I think I know what Peter Surkoff would say. I think Porter Surkoff would say, yeah, you put it in there. If they don't want to do it, fine, don't do it. But that'll be telling. That'll tell you all you need to know about the relationship. I do know what Peter Surkoff would say. Peter Surkoff would say, oh, let it be voluntary. But if they don't do it, telling. Because this is a no-brainer, to your point. So, and I think, knowing a little bit, I don't want to get too open about the politics about this, about us. This was part of the budgetary process. I had to work hard for Roswell Inc.'s money last year. Everybody in this room knows this except for Sarah. I had to work hard. Me, Brunt, numero uno. I had to work hard for Roswell Inc. again this year, politically, okay? Now, I'm the guy that gets preceded as the bad guy. That's okay. I'm cool with that. But I do hope that I have a little bit of credibility, at least with you guys. And I'm doing this because I really think it's the best thing to bring them more credibility and get so that, to your point, Sarah, I don't want to have an ongoing discussion and debate about financing partner organizations. I would like to have long-term plans in place with long-term understandings of what the financial arrangements are for the organization. So it's not an every year, everybody comes sweating and have to get through the same silly process. I would really like us to get out of that process. But I also have to be frank and say, look, there's real politics. When I came into office, right, my colleagues, Peter Vanstrom, Lee Hills, Will Morthland, and you and I had this discussion, right? There was clarity given to us by the people that voted for us. And to this council's credit, I said, please give Roswell Inc. a chance. Don't defund them. And this council did not do that in FY23. And as part of this maturation process of trying to create a real economic strategy, about hiring an economic development director, creating an economic liaison on city council, bringing in a COO, lots of pieces that we are still putting together, the things we didn't do 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, by hiring a world-class consultant. We hired a master planner. We did some good work. We learned some things from it. We did real consultation work. And from that, we learned. And I'd recognize that not every, there's this process, everybody can't see everything. And I would love for everybody to see everything. Because there's no secrets going on. It's just the inability to translate every information in the sophisticated world about all the decisions that are being made at any given time. And the consultant that we've hired is to help us help facilitate our wisdom, our collective wisdom, to come up with a long-term economic strategy for the city. And to use the resources that we have and some resources that we don't have. And I believe that Roswell Inc. and Roswell CVB are internal resources that we have that will help us do that. Not everybody believes that, but I do. And I want to continue to invest in them. But I'm also clearly aware that there's a real political divide in the city, and the politics, like, if we talk historically, just talk honestly, like, the people who have historically been in power support Roswell Inc. and Roswell CVB, historically. The people who haven't been in power, who voted very large numbers in the last election in 2021, not in your election, not yours. Very different group of people. Exactly. We're, generally speaking, not happy about the Roswell Inc. thing. And they're still out there, right? Because we haven't given them enough reasons to say, man, this is a viable piece of the city. And I think that the board of Roswell Inc. truly understands the same thing. It's like, well, we don't want to be in business if the city doesn't want us to be in business. What's the point of being in Roswell Inc. if the city doesn't want us? And what I want to have clarity is I want the city to want them, but there does need to be a clear construct, which we need to figure out. We have not figured that out. I think that I personally have articulated some of that construct, and I think some of that's been heard, and I think some of it's not been heard, and some of that's happened, right? It's just happened. And I really think that us being together more, like, listen, it's just kind of like we talked about the budget. I wish city council, all 6 people in the city council meeting were in every budget meeting, because I think we get better solutions. But I started this by saying, I think I know, I'm speaking for Peter Sorkoff, and he's not in a position to speak for himself right now, but I think I know what Peter would say. He'd probably say, yeah, don't make it mandatory. But if they don't sign it, they just told you a lot. And that's a hard position to recover from politically when you just funded them. Like, so there probably is a little trust but verify piece, in this. Like, I'm asking you to trust me, but if you don't, what am I going to tell the people who politically don't want them? Then I've been keep saying, please fund them, please keep the Roswell taxpayers funding $270,000 for them. What am I going to tell them? Well, Kurt, you're an idiot. We trusted you, and you see, same old, same old. And so I think your equation's fair. Make it non-mandatory. I think that's what Peter Sorkoff would say.
Is that what we're saying?
Exactly.
No, I'm asking, is that what we're gonna?
No, but what I'm asking you is, but I'm going to ask Sarah, I'm going to ask you and Peter, because I don't have to ask Will, Lee, or Christina, Mike. I'm going to ask you, so what are you going to say if they don't sign it? You're going to still see it as I think, kind of justifying it. And what I'm telling you is that would be offensive. That's what Peter's saying, like, oh my God.
If they don't sign it or if they don't move it to City Hall, if it was optional?
If it's optional. Like, why would you turn that down? So, yeah, I'm with you. I'll take a risk. We may get outvoted here, okay? But I'll take the risk. But what I'd ask you is, would you feel like equally like stunned Like, if they don't, because I would be, like, that's what I meant. Like, if I was on the other side of the equation, you wouldn't have to ask me twice. Of course I'm moving to City Hall. You give me access to him, her, him, all day long. Yes, sir.
Councilmember Vanstrom.
No, I will answer that question. I think there's a belief among, and because I've been to their board meetings and by the way, I did want to clarify one thing, Sarah. You would love some of the new board appointees that this council did vote in. There was a whole gamut covered of all different types of people that were voted in on the last board. Kudos to the folks sitting here. Very diverse. It was very diverse. And that's because that's what that board demands and needs to have, a special qualified people who are great business folks. But anyway, I think there's a belief by the executive board and by the board itself at Roswell Inc. that being a further independent arm is very beneficial for the services that they give to this city. And I think that would take some time. It was a great first step that we did last year in getting more engagement with them, to start understanding them and to start working more with them hand in hand. And Steve and Daryl have been working very, very hard hand in hand throughout this whole year. But I think there's still a feeling with that board. So if you did ask them, here's your olive branch, and they said no, their reason for no would be not the same maybe as what you're anticipating. So I want to clarify what their no would be. Their no, if it were a no, would be, but we see ourselves as an independent arm of the city, and we see ourselves as a group of business folks who like to maintain a sense of independence, helping the city as best we can under the direction of the city, but also under the direction of ourselves, because a lot of what they do is a lot of hoorah and a lot of support for all the businesses in the city. They get together and they have wonderful events and they promote each other, and they feel like that should be separate from the politics of City Hall. And so that's a big jump to go from, we do this separately because we're not in the politics, we're not in the political realm, but we're benefiting the city because we have such a positive impact on the businesses. And so I think I'm trying, and I hope I'm coming across with a bit of an explanation of where it's not because they don't want to be a part of the city. It's that they see as an independence that they're benefiting the city outside the political arena. And being in City Hall may be perceived, I don't know, you haven't given them the MOU yet, but I think it may be perceived as hey, wait, we're getting too close to the mayor, the council, and everyone else, and we're not keeping our identity. That the businesses enjoy talking about the mayor and the council once in a while, blowing off some steam about the mayor and the council. So that's just, I'm not saying right or wrong, and I'm not saying that can't be redirected over time, and I think that's where we're headed, but I think that's why you're gonna get that immediate reaction.
I could debate for another hour, but it is 7:30.
Well, this is, I think we're talking overall structure of where we started. 18 months ago when we started, we wrote 41 things down. After spending 45 days together, 6 to 10 hours a day, the 6 of us, and forgive us, I do not mean to exclude you, I apologize. The 6 of us wrote down 41 edicts of what the things we wouldn't accomplish, right? One of them, which is, and then we had another 12 or 15, which really weren't as clear publicly. One of those was, forgive me, Mr. Knight, and I apologize, I do not need to be insulting when I say this, but from our perspective, one of them was staff will not create policy. Do you guys remember that? We came in and said, staff, we had a perspective that staff was creating policy. And we said, can't do that. We're responsible for creating policy. Staff's responsible for executing policy. That was a big deal. I'll tell you, 18 months later, I think everybody feels pretty comfortable with that. I think everybody feels very comfortable with the relationship with the staff and the town and the city and the elected officials. Major win, major achievement by the staff, major achievement by electeds. The second part of it, which came in and said, oh my gosh, this city is so disparate in its activity through its boards and commissions, through its development authority, through its economic activity, there are so many fiefdoms that are creating policy, right? And there are 7 people technically responsible for the policy of the city, the 6 city council people and the mayor. And we said, somebody got to take charge for that. And we said, we're going to do that. And we said, we're going to start bringing in alignment to boards and commissions, to the development authorities, to even Roswell Inc., because we recognize that there was disparate activity, none of it malicious, none of it malevolent, all well-intended, good, smart, professional, capable people trying to bring solutions to this city. But we recognized that that disparate activity was not solving this city's problems. It was creating more problems. And so we said as a group, that's one of our charges. We're responsible for policy, and we have to bring strategic alignment into that policy. We said that, and we've been working on that. And one of the things that concerns me about the justification, what I hear the Roswell Inc. conversation, is its disparate potential activity. I agree with you, Peter, 110%. Strategically, just like you have to have a development authority. That's why we created another one. You have to have tools and assets underneath your economic stratagem to execute certain things that government entities cannot do. 110%. But there has to be absolute 100% disciplined alignment on the strategy. And what concerns me is Roswell Inc., like a lot of organizations, was created. Steve has given me the beautiful creation of it and how that story's changed. And basically like the original DDA, created, well, what's our charge? Go make things work. Well, that's not much of a charge, right? And then Roswell Inc. has been blamed for the economic malaise that happened in the city, right? Lack of economic development, businesses leaving, not recruiting new businesses, not recruiting the right businesses. Roswell Inc., you probably saw my sensitivity about this, about them being called an EDO, because I didn't want them to take the charge for that. The flip side of that is as though creating the discipline that you brought up either, Peter, is what is it they're going to do ultimately? What is your discipline, right? Are you going to be the key insider in helping us in recruiting new key industries once we decide what those key industries are? You're going to be the lead player in that, right? Are you going to be the lead player in bringing in specific development into the city? Are you going to be the strategic ombudsman for middle-sized businesses or small businesses, right? Are you going to have a chamber of commerce element? All these things that right now Steve has to balance a lot of balls, which is kind of like a master of not doing anything great. And I think it's our responsibility to help Roswell Inc. be great. Because I keep hearing independent, and I'm with you from a strategic perspective. I am not with you on it from a strategic alignment perspective. Like if Roswell Inc., look, any set of businesses, just like the Arts Fund, people love the arts, they can go create an arts fund, right? But once you start saying, hey, I want the public dollars, I want your dollars, I want the residents' tax dollars with it, then the entity, the government entity, has a responsibility for strategic alignment. That's true with the economic organization. And I'm not so sure, everybody says it, yeah, we understand, but I don't think that ball moved as much as it needed to. And I really thought when I said, look, and I'll keep taking the arrows, I don't care. I'll be the bad guy in this whole conversation. But behind the scenes, the guy's been fighting to keep this group viable, to keep the city in the business of keeping Roswell Inc. viable and getting taxpayer money is me. So I think I got a little credibility on this when I'm saying, yes, but I need you strategically aligned with us. You can bring stuff to the table, but if you go out doing your own thing, that doesn't serve the city's strategic economic interest, not in my mind. And that's where we've been. And that has to change. And I'm not so sure, and I think that's part of the frustration, if you keep funneling money into Roswell Inc. and there's not a clarity of that understanding, then we're going to keep having the same conversations. And I don't think anybody thinks that's fruitful. So I'm sorry to go on so long. I apologize. This is important to me. Roswell Inc.'s important. Steve's important to me. I mean, you saw my email. I got pissed off at him. I'm going to get pissed off at him again because he's important to me. And I want him to be successful. I want Roswell Inc. to be successful. But I want there to be clarity and agreement about what that looks like.
and I don't think this, that, to your point, that it exists today. I do think I know what Peter Surkoff would say.
We do have a motion and a second.
We do have a motion and a second, and we have had discussion. We've had discussion, but any further discussion?
Well, don't ask any more clarifying questions.
All right. We had a motion and a second. We've had discussion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion?
What is the motion?
Can you restate your motion, Councilmember Palermo, please?
It was 30 minutes ago, but I remember it vividly. So I motion to have staff take these MOUs with that one correction that needs to occur in two places regarding the appointment and reappointment, and send these MOUs to each partner organization, and to put this on the next regularly scheduled mayor and council meeting for council to vote on it.
All right, that motion was by Councilmember Palermo and seconded by Councilmember Hall. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. All right, thank you very much. And that does conclude the Administration and Finance and Recreation and Parks Committee meeting for this evening. Do we have a motion of adjournment? Motion adjourned by Councilmember Hall, second by Councilmember Hills. All in favor? Aye. All right. Is the committee inclined to take a 5-minute break? Committee inclined, everybody, 5 minutes, and we'll reassemble in 5 minutes for the next committee?
5 minutes?
5?
3 minutes?
to the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for June 13th, 2023. Council members who are present, Mayor Kurt Wilson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Michael Palermo, Councilmember Peter Vanstrom, Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember G. Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland. I'm here with City Attorney David Davidson and Michelle Miller of the council office. The purpose of committee meetings are for city departments to convey information to the mayor and city council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. By ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, council members, and the city administrator, and the city administrator serves as the chair of these committee meetings. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while the public is certainly welcome to attend and certainly view online, we do not take public comments or questions at committee meetings unless specifically authorized by mayor and council. Public comments or questions are received on the second and fourth Monday at city council meeting held at city council chambers, and on the fifth Monday of each month in open forum. We do encourage citizens to engage our online platforms, and if they have any questions, residents have any questions or need information, we certainly encourage you to contact our staff and talent of the city to provide that information for you. We also encourage residents and those interested in the city of Roswell to download the City of Roswell app and web service portal, and certainly access Roswell 365, which is a comprehensive community calendar of events in the city. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for May 9th, 2023. I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Council Member Beeson, second by Council Member Hills. Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The first item under Public Safety Fire, item number 2, is consideration for the fire department to replace the 2013 Ford F-450 rescue ambulance at a cost not to exceed $159,985. And we have the illustrious staff of the Roswell Fire Department here, Chief Panino, Deputy Chief Troche, and I'd like to introduce the third party with you here.
Absolutely, Mayor and Council. This is Deputy Chief Bryant Wolf. He's been with the city for 27 years as a part-time firefighter. He's recently retired from Gwinnett County as the Assistant Chief of Business Services. So we're happy to have him as the Deputy Chief of Administration. He's going to be presenting one of the items tonight, as well as Chief Troche.
Thank you, Chief Panino. All right. The first item, again, the consideration of the fire department to replace the 2013 Ford F-450 rescue ambulance at a cost not to exceed $159,985.
Thank you. So this is for this is a budgeted replacement to replace the rescue ambulance. This is a transport style ambulance. The fire department, in consultation with Fleet Services, is replacing an ambulance style rescue with one more cost efficient non-transport style light duty rescue. And worth noting here, we will still have that transport capability in the city, so that will still be available. But for this specific item, we will be going to a non-transport style ambulance. So there's some response enhancements included in this. Besides it being more versatile of a vehicle, there are fuel savings in there. It's more fuel efficient unit. The project was advertised on the City of Roswell website and posted on the Georgia Procurement Registry. We had a bid come in, and the crew cab truck that meets the requirements for this project at $159,985, which also includes all the fabrication that's needed to make sure that this unit meets our needs that were listed on there.
Motion
Happy
to
answer any
approve.
questions.
All right.
I just want to make sure that this 2013 Ford F-50 rescue truck does not end up at the house of Dr. Joe Panino. Just want to make sure that we get a new one, that this is not some kind of
There's no guarantee on that.
Okay, all right.
You have to put
I'm
that in the
keeping my
next
motion
item
the
in
same
ordinance.
still.
Yes, and yeah, for the public, yeah, for the public, we do have protocols in place to address such issues. Yes,
Councilmember Beeson seconded my motion.
motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Beeson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Item number 3, consideration of an ordinance to amend Chapter 8, Article 8.3 regarding fire protection and prevention of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell.
All right, Mayor, Council, this is a kind of a heavy item. There's a lot of changes to it because the ordinance is very old and needed a lot of updating. So I'm not going to cover all the changes. I'll only try to cover the substantive ones that I think kind of matter. A lot of this makes the ordinance reflect the way that we operate current day. It removes unnecessary sections, reducing it from 26 to 19, adopts modern language, removes language that conflicts with state law, and adds language to protect the city. So I'm going to run through some of the changes. It removes language that references the volunteer fire department. It removes the section that talks about the deputy chief. It singles out the deputy chief position because it's redundant. Includes language in the fire marshal section about the fire marshal being able to amend some of the fire prevention code when necessary, providing it doesn't lessen the life safety of a building. It includes language about third-party maintenance and reporting of records for fire and life safety systems. That is going to reference our next item on the agenda, the compliance engine. And that is language that's already in the state fire code, but we're adopting it as part of the local ordinance to make it more clear. And it also removes language requiring the fire marshal's office to be recognized by the state of Georgia as a post agency, meaning its own separate law enforcement agency. That is redundant. There are extra requirements in doing that, in requiring that, and talking with the police chief, those post functions can fall underneath the police department. There's no need for us to have a redundant police organization in the city, in the fire marshal's office. It also includes language about standby and emergency fire watches. If we need to do that, we can charge for that along with the city's fee schedule. And it adds language about hazardous materials releases and mitigation. If we were called to a hazardous materials spill and someone was at fault, a tanker rollover, it gives us the authority in our ordinance to charge the responsible party for all the expenses in cleaning up such a spill. Those are the highlights, and I'll be happy to go into any more detail that you would like to.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor Wilson.
Yeah, congratulations, Joe. Thanks for doing this. I know there's been a lot of work with you and your staff. Thank you for getting this done. Good changes for the city. Thank you. I can't highly recommend it enough.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Councilmember Hall.
And we talked briefly during the break. I just want to confirm that this is just to put us in compliance with the state, with the language that's already in the state, and nothing beyond that related to International Fire Code or anything like that.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Further questions or comment? Councilmember Beeson, please.
Unless there's any other further questions, I'd like to make a motion on this.
All right. Motion by Councilmember Beeson. Second by Councilmember Borthland. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 4, approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with Ricer LLC to collect, organize, and store all code-required third-party inspection, testing, and maintenance records for commercial occupancies in the city of Roswell. Benino.
This will be my presentation.
All right, okay, all right.
So, tough act to follow with the ordinance, so thank you very much. So, this is the compliance engine. So, the third-party inspection, testing, and maintenance responsibilities fall upon the business owners to make sure, as they currently do, to make sure that they're compliant and they've been tested to meet the current standards. So part of this process, currently, the fire marshal's office goes out and does these inspections upon an annual basis to all businesses, and this is part of the process to make sure that they've met compliance with their, whether it be their sprinkler system, their fire alarm system, if they have hood suppression systems for cooking. So last year, the Roswell Fire Department completed 8,676 inspections, and part of the time that this happens, when the inspectors go out, they end up getting to businesses that are not compliant because they haven't called for those tests to be completed. Part of the problem with that is businesses don't typically want to expend the money until they're required to, and that usually falls upon the time of inspection. This prevents that ahead of time. This third party comes in, advises businesses, hey, you're due for your inspection. Once those are completed, we'll contact the fire department and let them know, hey, here you go. These businesses have been completed and they're ready for inspection. Nationally, about 40% of businesses are either untested or not properly maintained on an annual basis. Currently, we fall in line with that at 40.7%. So traditional methods of paper and pencil and going out and doing this slows the process, creates re-inspections, which at the end of the day, waste time. So this is an effort to increase efficiencies and productivity of the fire marshal's office so we can focus that time more on community risk reduction activities and doing a community risk assessment to kind of find out where our focus points are in the city to make the community safer. Currently, the cities of Sandy Springs, Johns Creek, and Alpharetta utilize the compliance engine, and they have had much success with these reduction and re-inspections. And I believe the city of Milton is starting their service in July of this year. So one of the things that's unique about this is it's not a cost to the city. We currently have computers and training facilities to train our people. That part of this process, Ricer will come in and train our personnel. And the only cost is currently to the businesses. That's one aspect of it. They still have to pay for the inspections, but each submittal is $17 currently, according to Ricer's fee schedule. So if a business has a hood system, a fire alarm, and a sprinkler, they're going to pay for 3 submittals. And then whatever that is on top of whatever fee the inspection companies charge. So this is not something we collect, but just being fully transparent, this is an additional cost for some of the businesses, but it's very low in comparison. Sure.
It's not a cost to the businesses, it's a cost to the inspection companies that come out and do the service on the business. So if they come out, test the hood system, clean the hood system, maintain it, once that's done, that business pays the $17. The company performing that service pays Bricer to upload it into the system. And then we have access to those records. So before we go out and do an inspection on a business, we can check and say, yep, they're compliant, or no, they're not. We don't need to waste our time going out there, knowing we're gonna have to go back out there again. The other thing that this company does is it makes sure that they stay up to speed on all of their inspections, so we don't have to remind them. And this is also a part of our fire alarm strategy. So we have a couple things working. This is one of them. If the fire alarms are tested and maintained on a more regular basis, we're less likely to be going out on false alarms all the time. So this is a part of an overarching strategy on that as well. And I would also say that the companies that perform these services, though they have to pay the $17 to upload the inspection, they're getting more business because they're more regularly being called out to make sure that the services are being performed. So we think it's an efficiency all around.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations, Joe, for getting Mr. Officer Wolf, who came from obviously Cry Wolf,
So, well done, thank you, since you brought up. There's a false alarm? So who do I bill for the false alarm? Yeah. In all seriousness, I won't ask you all the questions we have at our usual meetings, because we've gone through a lot of this. Again, a really good thing, and I gotta congratulate you. I want to do it so publicly, because I think it's a great example of how, Randy, the staff continues to rise to the challenge when we say, hey, not happy with this false alarms. You got one strategy, but we need to develop many layers and add more pieces to this equation if we really want to get serious about solving this for our city. And I congratulate you on bringing this in for a whole host of reasons, but one is addressing the false alarm strategy. So thanks, Joe, for doing it.
Thank you. All right, any further questions or comments? Councilmember Beeson? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hall?
I was gonna make a motion. Do you have another question?
Please, yes.
So I'm a little bit confused as to how how this is implemented. So I own a restaurant, and I know I have to get inspections, or I get inspected by you all once a year. How are you gonna inform me about this? Can you walk me through the steps?
So currently, if you're a restaurant owner, you need to get your hood inspected every year, currently. Oftentimes, that doesn't get done until we show up as the fire marshal's office to do your inspection and say, hey, do you have your hood inspected? You say, I was gonna do that. So then you have to call and get that company to come inspect your hood, and we have to come back out once it's done to check that off the list. So there's 2 visits for us right there. What this company does, Brycer, it knows you need that inspection done. It sends you a letter and says, it's been a year, you need to get the inspection done on your hood. It has to be done annually. When the company comes out and does the inspection on your hood, they upload the records to Brycer. We get them in the fire marshal's office. We see that you're compliant, and we come out to do your inspection. We don't ask you about that stuff. We already have those records. So we just do our normal inspection, and we're kind of on our way.
Councilmember Hall?
Can businesses opt in or opt out of this program?
No. So right, it doesn't really impact the business owner because it's a records management. The business has to pay to get the inspection done regardless of the system. It's whether they keep their records on site or whether the company that does the inspection uploads the records to Brycer. And the company that uploads the inspection would pay the $17, not the business owner.
Well, they're going to pass the cost along to the business owner.
They may. All the cities around us have already adopted this with the exception of Milton, so it's also feasible that they've already adopted changed their fee schedule to accommodate this on a regional level. We're one of the later ones to adopt this.
Thank you.
Sure.
Joe, just to be clear, sorry, Mr. Chairman, you're saying that the fee structures may already be reflective of the increase in charges. But just kind of illustrate it, because most people don't know this unless they've done this, right?
Yeah.
So most of the inspection companies, these are, I don't want to sound, they're not super sophisticated businesses. I'm cleaning hoods, right? And then I'm inspecting hoods. Those are 2 different pieces. So I think Christine's point's important because you're trying to make this easier for all parties. And there is a cost associated with it. The cost is going to be paid by the inspection company. But what you're suggesting is you believe that there might be reason to believe is that pricing may already be included for businesses in Roswell, even though the service, since it's a regional piece.
Right.
Pricing, these vendors are acting, let's call it North Metro region. They're already in the North Metro region. They're probably not offering a discounted price to Roswell businesses because they're not using this service.
Right. I think that is a reasonable thing to expect because Alpharetta and Johns Creek and Smyrna and Sandy Springs have already adopted this. So those companies that operate regionally may or may not be giving Roswell businesses a break because they don't have to upload the records. I can't say that for sure. Cherokee County, yeah, it brings a lot of efficiencies to the program, and ultimately helps to make sure that those systems are more compliant and up to speed, and we're not wasting efforts when we go out there to do an inspection, have to go back out there a second or third time.
What about Norcross? Might as well cover all angles. Gwinnett County does not. I think, Sarah, you were making a motion. Oh, sorry.
Councilmember Morthland, yes, sir.
If you have a business, let's just say it's not necessarily a restaurant, but if you have a business that is on top of all the record keeping, and you do have an office manager that is super on top of everything that needs to take place, and they have a reminder set for themselves on their fire extinguisher, and they have a tickler set at the beginning of the month of that expiration date to get that done, is there a way that the business can perform that and then turn around and submit it into the system on their own without having to have some kind of inspection piece done?
No, the business has to get an inspection done. The business wouldn't be qualified to do their own inspection on these systems, like sprinkler system. The business owner can't inspect their own sprinkler system. It has to be done by a company that's trained to do that currently and moving forward.
Councilmember Hall.
Just clarification, so when you're going out there as the fire marshals, you're just looking for their inspection certificates?
Correct.
You're not doing the inspections, you're saying, hey, show me the piece of paper?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
But just for the record, Joe does do some inspections on the side, so we appreciate it.
That new truck.
In my new truck.
All right. Any further question or comment? All right, we'll entertain a motion. Councilmember Beasley.
Motion to approve for mayor and/or city administrator signing contract with Brycer.
All right. Motion, we have a motion by Councilmember Beeson, second by Councilmember Vanstrom. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 5 is a fire information item. Did you want to briefly summarize this, Chief? All right, thank you. Chief Panino?
So this is to inform mayor and council that we are going to be doing an RFQ for disaster recovery services. These are board-up type companies that come out to houses or businesses after there's been a fire or a flood to help mitigate any future damage, any further damage, and secure the property. So basically what we would be doing is doing an RFQ for certified contractors in the state of Georgia to provide these lists of services. Removing water, stabilizing a structure, putting tarps on the roof if there was a fire or disaster, and really helping the business owner or the occupant, the resident, get through the next 24 hours after there's been an emergency. There's no cost to the city. What's in it for the businesses that we vet and decide to utilize and put on a call rotation is that they can be selected by the homeowner to continue the services, which then they would be paid by the insurance company. It's specified, it will be specified in the RFQ that no money is gonna exchange hands, and if the insurance does not pay, that the contractor has to provide the service at a loss. So we see this as a big benefit for our business owners and citizens that do suffer an emergency or a fire to help get them through the first 24 hours. When we hand off the services from dealing with the emergency to taking care of them in the near term.
All right, Chief. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. What if the victim or the person that had the damage doesn't want to go with they can choose their own?
Correct.
So basically, you were going to say, hey, here's a card of somebody that you can reach out to or pick your own person?
So the way that this is designed and the way it's utilized in the region is we dispatch them to the scene while we're still there. And we introduce the contractor to the homeowner and we let them know, this is the arrangement, they're gonna help you, you don't owe them any money. If you wanna use them, your insurance company can pay them, but you don't owe them anything and you don't have to. And so they can say, no thanks, and we got our own person, or they can let the company help them out with boarding up the house or securing it or getting the water out of the house.
Mayor Wilson?
Joe, serious question.
Yep.
why in the world are you getting in this business? I'm looking at this, that the property owner will inspect the site to determine if it's adequately secured. I don't remember us talking about this, so I apologize if we did. Because every incident is different. The on-scene battalion chief will recommend actual services for each incident. And of course, you got bulleted, it looks like 12 different services. I'm confused. Why would you want to be doing that?
It's to care for our citizens. It
That
is-
sounds like one gigantic, colossal mess for an on-site battalion chief.
No, it's after the incident is winding down, that the emergency's been mitigated. What we run into now is we're walking away from the scene and we don't have anything to pass our residents off to and say, they'll help you with the next part. This gives us that option, someone that's gonna help them with at least the next 24 hours of securing the house, putting tarps on the roof, getting the water out, getting clothes for them out of their house.
So literally, the on-site battalion chief will say, look, I understand you need displaced pet care and boarding.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna communicate that formally to the contractor. I understand that you need temporary power generators. I'm gonna communicate that formally as the on-site battalion to the contractor. I'm gonna communicate, look, obviously you need structural stabilization, which could be a very technical, right, analysis.
Yeah.
I'm gonna communicate that formally as the on-site battalion chief for the city of Roswell to the resident or the business,
In practice,
i.e. to the contractor.
In practice, the way it works is the battalion chief, the owner or the resident, and the company that shows up have a meeting, and they say, here's so-and-so, they came out to help you get the water out of the house, help get some clothes for you, help find you a place to stay tonight. And the battalion chief explains to them the agreement that no money's gonna change hands, you're not gonna be charged for this if you decide to use them. They will bill your insurance company, and they're just gonna help you out pretty much.
No, I mean, it's an amazing service you're offering. And this is incredible. But do you have any liability, for example, if you don't offer structural stabilization as part of the recommendation? I'm the on-site battalion chief. I just went through 5 hours of a pretty bad structural fire. I got a family displaced. There's a list of issues that I have to address, right? Including my crew and the family,
Yeah.
and now I got a contractor. And if I fail to identify all of the issues that are bulleted here, is there liability on your behalf as a consequence of that?
The way that we would write the RFQ, and obviously consultation with legals to make sure that there wasn't any, and I'm gonna recommend that we don't get hung up on the battalion chief having to recommend services. It's probably more of an introduction of, they do this for a living, this is what they do, they can help you out, you don't owe them anything, but we wouldn't write anything in a way that we would be liable. The company itself is a certified contractor, and they would be in the business of knowing, we would vet those contractors and ensure that we didn't have any liability.
Councilmember, okay. Councilmember, Upcoming Hall and then, okay, Councilmember Hall.
Right now, do you call like the Red Cross or what happens right now?
Yeah, we've utilized the Red Cross. And that's pretty much for housing, and they can give people gift cards.
But my question is, I mean, aren't you handing them off to an organization right now, and that organization is basically saying, here's a list of people, we'll do this?
Not all the time, no. So for example, if the person has a place to stay and they say, my neighbor lives right up the street, there's really no room for Red Cross in that. Their basic need is taken care of. No one's gonna get into, what should I do with my house now? There's a hole in the roof. This company would help with some of those services.
So right now, we walk away and people are on their own, and they're going through the yellow pages and calling Service Master or something like that.
Right, or calling their insurance company.
Can I follow up on that question? You've really opened up Pandora's box here. I mean, you have, no good deed goes unpunished. So how do we follow up with the victims? How do we know? Like, you went out and performed services, you took care of business. drive back to the station, job done. How do we know? Do we have a system where we're following up with the, hey, what, not what was the success rate or failure rate of what transpired because of our activity?
Do you mean, are we talking about a company now, or?
He means the family, so. If I can clarify, in his situation, I think it's blowing some minds right now because it blew my mind too when you initially described this to me. In our mind, you put out the fire, job's done, and then there's some gracious entity that steps in regardless of the scope of the fire that's like, I know that you're standing in the cold rain, your house is smoldering ashes, come with me. I'll give you clothes and food and housing arrangements, and something will come in and fix what's happening to your housing structure that's falling apart. What my understanding is from them, only in very catastrophic instances would like Red Cross step in. So with like massive, what was it, multifamily structure fires. But a family recently had a fire in their laundry room that completely took out their laundry room. In that instance, you don't have somebody who's going to step in and be like, I'll take it from here, guys. You finish putting out the fire, I'm going to be the fail gap or the bridge the gap between what happens when catastrophe is over, how do I go back to normal life? I think their goal in this is to make sure we are caring for our residents, that they do have someone who can step in, who can even go as far as, hey, I'll put you up in hotel, because that company at the end of the day knows insurance will reimburse. To cover the CYA on our end, we have it written in our indemnification clauses that it's not our responsibility if insurance comes back and says, nope, this homeowner set the fire themselves, it's their fault, we're not gonna cover it. We're not held accountable.
Councilmember, let me get Hills. Councilmember Hills.
Bring our dice to name placards.
All right.
I do have something, but I think we'll.
Councilmember Morphlin.
My question was, and she hinted on it just before, is how does this apply to multifamily? How does this apply to an apartment? Because the only thing for an apartment family that I'm seeing on this list would be provide temporary housing for victims at no charge. Everything else basically be handled at the contractor level of whoever's taking care of the apartment, right?
So in that situation, we would call somebody out and probably get them with management and have some sort of collaboration, even with Red Cross, if we needed to facilitate that meeting and try to get people housed. Maybe the management company says, we already have maintenance that takes care of this. Maybe they say, actually, we don't have anyone. We'll use whoever you have here to start mitigating any further damage from water or whatever that's happening. Really, it's providing something where there's nothing. We did have an incident not too long ago with an apartment building where we did work with Red Cross, and it didn't go as smoothly as we would have liked, and we ended up going back out there and mitigating that ourselves and working on that. So this just provides another layer of options and assistance.
Can I, Mr. Chairman?
Councilmember Hills was waiting, but.
No, I got a quick, I got an easy thing. I'm going to suggest deferring this matter. I think there's some further conversation that needs to take place. I think there's some really good questions and some illumination of those questions. And I'm out of great respect for the Dr. Joe Panino. I don't want to illuminate all of those issues in this format because I think there's some more due diligence I think that I would like for us to do. It's just a suggestion. So I'd like to suggest deferring it.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Hills, yes?
I'll air mine offline. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right. Okay, all right. Okay.
So I'm making a motion
You're
for
making-
deferral.
Mayor is making a motion to defer to the next available.
I kill it, just defer it.
Defer. All right. We have a second council.
One question, sorry.
Okay.
Just for the point of clarity as liaison, are there any specific items that you need clarity on before this comes back up? And I assume it would be in the next committee meeting, or is that not set at this point in time?
Short answer, yes. Out of great respect for our fantastic public safety officials and firemen. I don't want to raise all those questions right now. I'd like to.
No, that's perfect. Is it something that we could circle back on for the next committee meeting, or do you think it's much larger than that?
No, I think we can circle back by the next committee meeting.
So can we say in the motion for deferrals to the next committee meeting then?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That motion, a friendly amendment, motion by Mayor
Absolutely.
Wilson.
Yeah, yeah.
Second by Councilmember Hills. Hall. Councilmember Hall. All right, any further discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you, that passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, we'll note that under Public Safety Police, we have no action items. And then we do have just a few items from Public Works, Ms. Izo and Watson. The first item being consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to award a contract with Inliner Solutions LLC for the East Roswell Area Park Stormwater Lining Project for an amount not to exceed $598,830. I will note on this item, I appreciate certainly the synergy between Recreation and Parks and Stormwater taking the lead on this particular item. And as a matter of note, the funding source was approved last fall on this item. This is being brought to you for potential contract award. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Izo.
Thank you. So as Mr. Knighton explained, that this is a project that Stormwater has worked with Rec and Parks on. We assessed the infrastructure at East Roswell Park. We ranked the projects, we scoped the projects, we work with procurement, and we will provide oversight and project management for the rehabilitation project. This is a great example of bundling a number of projects together and us recognizing some cost effectiveness in doing that. We had initially priced their cost estimated this at about a $900,000 collection of work, and we were able to contract for it for less than $600,000. We are going to include some funding for unforeseen conditions to allow us to continue to move forward in the construction of these projects, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions on this item? Motion, or Councilmember Morthland, I'm sorry.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Councilmember Morthland with a motion to approve, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion?
Very grateful for the collaboration.
Seeing none, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 7, consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to award a contract with Jacobs to provide CIP program management services. Councilmember Beeson.
Just wanted to let everybody know that I'll be recusing on both this item and the next item as it relates to Jacobs, as my firm is a sub-consultant to a joint venture that Jacobs is party to.
All right, thank you for that notation and acknowledgement.
Wow. Last 2 items. Oh, wow. Say something.
Love y'all, bye.
It's required of the veteran to have to stay as well.
Veteran of every meeting.
They've already endured enough, Will.
All right, with that notation, item number 7, consideration for the mayor and/or city administrator to award a contract with Jacobs to provide CIP program management services. Ms. Izo.
Thank you. As you recall, in November of '22, the Roswell residents voted to approve almost $180 million in general obligation bonds for proposed bond projects. In March of 2023, the city council voted to establish the Capital Improvement Projects Division under Environmental Public Works. And in that same month, we were able to release a request for qualifications for CIP program management. We had 8 firms that responded with qualifications, and we were able to shortlist 3 firms and schedule oral presentations on May 30th, 2023. The evaluation committee selected Jacobs as the top-ranked firm due to their overall technical approach and extensive relevant experience. I'd like to introduce Chris Cranmer, who is here from Jacobs. He will be our deputy program manager on this project for the term of the bond projects. And this is to approve us awarding a contract to Jacobs. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Ms. Isel? Any questions or comments? Councilmember Hills?
Comment, excited to get this rolling. Very exciting, thank you.
All right. Any further? Councilmember Vanstrom?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you guys. You've been working so hard, and it's moving quick. It's amazing. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions?
They want more compliments, we're not gonna give it to them. This is it.
All right, so with that, we will entertain a motion. Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Item number 8, consideration of mayor and/or city administrator to award a task order to Jacobs for CIP program management services in an amount not to exceed $226,793. Ms. Iso.
In the interest of continuing to move as quickly as possible, we are asking for a task order for Jacobs for the first task order for CIP program management. We were counting on the fact that you were going to agree to award the contract, and we didn't want to waste any more time. So this is the first task, and basically this will be our program validation task. It'll be creating a program management plan. It'll give them an opportunity to get in here and start working alongside us, shoulder to shoulder. One of the other things that we'll be doing that'll be important outcome of this particular task is taking a look at the design and construction cost estimates for the public safety, police, and fire projects, as well as the parking deck, which will give us a great deal of confidence moving forward in those cost estimates. And this task order is for $226,793. Happy to answer questions.
All right, questions for Ms. Iso or Mr. Watson? Mayor Wilson?
Just a request, on the rate schedule,
Yes, sir.
can you make that clearer next time?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, duly noted. Any further questions or comments? Councilmember Vanstrom?
When do you think we'll get an update as to what their first round of all the ideas and everything they're going to be considering?
So we have a very intensive 90-day approach in this task, where from the moment we get started with them and can issue the PO, they'll be working here in City Hall alongside of us. And so all of these deliverables that we're talking about are in the first 90-day time frame. And before that time frame expires, we'll be coming to you with the next task order to take the next steps. So we'll be moving very quickly once we can get our PO issued.
All right, thank you for that clarification.
Can you follow up on that?
Sure, Mayor Wilson?
When's the PO gonna get issued?
So this will come to council on
The 26th.
the 26th. And so the next day, it moves into finances court, and then we work through getting the PO issued. As far as timelines, I'd have to defer to Ryan on that one.
We have a special call meeting, can it come there?
Oh,
Yeah, I suppose so, if that's the desire, of mayor and council. I think we can
Bring it next Wednesday.
do it next Wednesday, if that's your desire. Okay, all right. With that, I'll entertain a motion if there are no longer any questions or comments. Councilmember Morthland. To the special,
With Wednesday, with the goal of this being at council on Wednesday.
special called meeting on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, all right? Motion by Councilmember Morthland, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That concludes the Public Safety and Public Works Committee meeting for June 13, 2023. We'll entertain a motion of adjournment. Motion by Councilmember Hills, second by Councilmember Morthland. All in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much for a very productive evening.